Good morning and welcome everyone to our October 3rd, 2023, 9 o'clock board briefing meeting. Let the record reflect that we have all 5 commissioners present. Commissioner French is on Zoom. Everyone else is in the conference room and our executive management team. And we are going to go ahead and just get going. We got a very full morning. So Chandra.
Good morning, everybody. So we are moving ahead, providing asbestos testing for the uninsured. We did have one minor snag in the contracting process. Spokane Clean Air wanted to see some changes to the scope of work, so we addressed that yesterday, and we have one contract returned with one service provider. We'll work that with the other one today, and hopefully have both of those contracts in place by the end of the day. We have 2 disaster reservists from state EMD working in our office right now, and they're primarily focused again. We're still trying to get a clearer picture on how many folks are uninsured and underinsured. And they're working with the local committees, the Elk Strong Committee, as well as the Reimagine Medical Aid Committee. Everybody's got lists. There's all sorts of lists floating around, and so the reservists are working to deconflict those lists, remove the duplications, and make sure that we have good, accurate information. We received the contract proposal from Salvation Army for the provision of disaster case management services forms, and once that's done, I anticipate that being a really pretty quick turnaround to get that back from Salvation Army and get it in front of you guys so we can start moving on the disaster case management. The long-term recovery group, the bylaws are complete, and based on guidance from Chris Anderson and our department's attorney, Wes, I have stepped back from the process now, and Todd Hume has volunteered to see the LTRG through the 501c3 application process, and he's going to do that for us pro bono, so that's really great for him to step up to do that. So that piece will be in place shortly. And then just looking ahead, I wanted to put something on the commissioner's radar, and actually building and planning also. We haven't had a lot of information on this yet, but we do want you to be aware that we could end up with some properties that are abandoned coming out of this. So far, we've had one conversation with a 85-year-old woman. She does not intend to rebuild, but we are going to go ahead and do the asbestos testing for her because she is uninsured. But she, I think, intends to eventually sell the property, but the debris will have to be cleaned before that can happen anyway. But just putting that on your radar that it may come up, months down the road that we have a number of abandoned properties to deal with.
So, but they're not abandoned because she's still going to sell it.
Hers is, yes. In her particular case, yes, she probably intends to sell, but just in the larger picture, we know folks are burying the debris just on their property, on their own, and we know that there will probably eventually be some folks who just walk away. Okay. Any questions?
Any questions?
Okay. Yes.
How is it going getting through the asbestos assessments? What's the latest on that?
It's frustrating.
Dare I ask?
It's really, and this happens in any disaster, not just this one, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are kind of casing the areas and offering services that they don't really provide. And so making sure that the folks who do have the ability to pay for asbestos testing are actually working, with someone who is actually certified, that's a challenge. And then just getting folks to answer the phone. Because, we have to identify that they're uninsured. And then once we connect them with the contractor to do the asbestos testing, they need permission to get on their property. So it's a lot of phone tag, and it's kind of frustrating, to be very honest. But you know, we're working it. We have the 2 reservists who are working it, and then we have some trusted voices. I will say the gentlemen at the Elk VFW are phenomenal. They are actually going out and trying to make direct contact with folks. So if they've been unwilling to fill out the contact form, we're at least getting information through those trusted voices. So it's going to be a long process.
What's a reasonable time though, would you say, for somebody to actually get their property tested for the asbestos? I mean, are you hearing from folks saying it's taking X number of days or weeks?
So
or
getting
beyond?
people out onto the properties to take samples is probably week and a half. The challenge is depending on where they send it for processing. If they're relying on the local labs, that's probably 2 weeks. We do know some contractors are overnighting it to various other certified labs around the country, and they're getting those results back much faster. And we did put that in our contract, that the expedited processing to other labs was allowable to get us on a little bit faster time frame. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Jeff and Heather.
So we have been requested to present what ARP is available right now, looking at the 25% match requirement that the funds from the state regarding the wildfires are requiring. By now, I think you'll recognize this particular sheet and format. You'll recall the end of August, when we did the mid-year report, we had some things listed in yellow. Some have been removed because we're getting more information. The ones that are still listed in yellow are ones we're working with to get more information on. What is actually available right now, we still have the 220,000 that's going to be returned from historic flight due to the bankruptcy and financial challenges there. Chris, do you know, have all the legal things been done that we can go ahead and do a resolution?
You know, basically, we never officially got an order from the receivership that formally acknowledged that in the receivership. However, the receivers are well aware of it and did not express any objection or disagreement on our kind of legal analysis of it. And I think at this point, and Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're well past the event that the funding was supposed
September,
to be for. So I don't think they've got any legal basis at this point to be asking for those funds.
Okay, so if you guys want, we can do a resolution for those $220,000. We don't, you know, the yellow sheet that has all the numbers for categories, they have not updated that sheet yet based on the 17th rule because we're in that 90-day comment period. So they don't give us a new numeric grid until the comment period closes. However, the comments say we can act under these interim new rules until they're finalized. And then if they finalize them different than we act, we'd still be grandfathered in. So there will be, per these rules, a new line item that will say emergency response or something like that regarding disasters. So we could move these funds that way. The other funds that we do have right now, you'll recall when Ziply purchased Patera and they returned that 100,000 that we subsequently did a transfer to other units of government to Medical Lake so that broadband work would still be completed. When we did that, I forgot to deal with the $10,000 indirect. And we don't do indirects when we transfer to another unit of government. So there's also that 10,000 that's still in our indirects that isn't qualified for indirects at this point because of the category change. So that would give us $230,000. The indirects that went with historic flight We would take indirects with this emergency category, so those indirects would stay in the contract. Thoughts, questions? Would you like to see a resolution to move the 220 and the 10?
And just for the commissioners, I'm just, we have the 1.25 from the state, the additional 1.25 that came from the governor, and then 2.9 from Commerce.
At the bottom of this sheet in red, you'll see the number we're looking to get to.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
For the 25% match, the 1.383 number.
Okay, so with those two, that takes us to
230, so that's leaving you about 1.15.
Yeah, so that would be oh,
Also, just for your information, we did have in reserves for the 23 budget, some monies for salaries, and we have about $1 million of that we did not have to use. So you could use that money also to help make up the difference that we already have budgeted in the general fund.
which could go here. I mean, it's also gonna be part of the, if sales tax doesn't come in
Correct.
as what we anticipate. But I mean, that's part of what we have fund balance for, is for these, unanticipated items. That's part of why you plan to have it. Cause I mean, we need to, so I'm happy to allocate the 230,000 from ARP and at this point, take the rest out of fund balance, hoping that there's others that may come back, if everybody, as we start to talk to the agencies that have contracts, if there's money that comes back.
There is one just yesterday, we heard from the town of Fairfield. You'll see under 5.18, they have one project that's completed. The second project, right above the yellow line that says 1.5 million, they told us they expect it to come in significantly under budget. So there could be some other money that comes back along the way. And then generally the way this works is the county's gonna pay for everything when it comes to the fire response. And then when we submit our reimbursement, we just submit for 75% because we're covering their 25%. So since it's gonna take some time to do this work, if other funds of ARP get returned, or for some reason aren't gonna be fully utilized and we bring them back during this time frame, we could keep putting them towards that cause.
I mean, I think that's a good use of the dollars.
Is there one-time money from legal settlements, or is that next year? That could arguably be.
We do have some one-time money. We have the Monsanto money, but we talked about that yesterday of using that for capital for 24. We also have some money, Heather, that was from the tribes or something that we got this last year. That's sitting in the grant funds right now that can be used for any purpose. We could use that money as well. I want to say that was about, is that 3? I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
I would have to look that one up.
I have it on a spreadsheet, I just don't have it with me, so. But we have some other one-time monies we could use also.
Randy, did you include those yesterday in the grants worksheet that you sent out to us?
Only the Monsanto,
Okay, not this other,
no.
okay. It would just be good to see all the different, I mean, I don't have a problem with putting, we need to put it aside and we need to have the match. But it seems like we've got a lot of different options.
Yep.
We do, so I mean, so in my mind, I think at this point, we, the 230, and then we can say it's coming out of fund balance at this point in time, but we've got till the end of the year to figure out what those other options could be. But at least we know the money is now, we can say it's there, we're gonna use it. So that way it's,
To be ready to go with
Freed up.
that. It takes our time and process to go through.
but then, yes, that you know, as we get to budget and all of that, you know, definitely part of the discussion. Hopefully it's just an expense that we don't have to worry about, that sales tax revenue will be higher than we think. You know, so there's a lot of things in play before the end of the year, I think that, but at least then everyone can know that we're confident that we have funds available, if not in other areas through fund balance, to take care of it, to get this, you know, committed.
And then one question we have, maybe Randy, I don't know yet the answer, who would we actually allocate this 232? What department? Is that like Chandra, is that
I would
finance
think
through
so,
Randy?
probably through emergency management. But-
Check with her.
But yeah, you'll have
make sure
to
she can take that.
talk to her and figure out.
So we'll figure out where, do this count as a briefing? Do we want to put it on consent? Let's get the details, or do you want it to come back again with the details?
I would,
The only detail is knowing what department to put it to.
Yeah, it might make sense for us to make sure the dollars that we assign from ARP and fund balance are in one account, so it makes it easier for us to track against on the matching funds. So I think Randy can.
I'll get with you, Jeff, but I think we'll just do that through the general fund.
So we'll work out that piece and then put it on consent, if that's good.
there, bobblehead, I think the head's on.
Well, I was seeing heads nod. You're all on tape.
Think your bobblehead, no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we had a schedule today. I'm Doug.
Morning.
Good morning.
Right, see if we can keep you ahead of schedule. Good morning, we appreciate the opportunity to brief you. We have, our first item actually is related to the Gray Fire. And we have an opportunity through Avista Utilities to receive some help in removal of risk trees that have been cut down at no cost to the county. So we would love to take advantage of that. If that's something that you're supportive of, we'll have, as a next step, there'll be a resolution before you a week from today that would authorize myself to sign that letter and take advantage of that help. But to that effect, we would like to share with you the impact on 3 properties that we have that were within the fire and greatly affected by the fire. So Mr. Chambers here has put together a great presentation, and I'll turn it over to him to share and talk through those impacts.
Morning, thank you.
Morning.
So Parks Department has 3 parcels. Next slide. You can see on the map, 2 are on Silver Lake, South Freeman Drive, both of which are about a quarter acre plus or minus. And then the larger parcel is on Willow Lake, 141 and a half. All 3 parcels were undeveloped. Willow Lake's a natural area. The Silver Lake parcels were just undeveloped in the small community. Next slide. The Silver Lake parcels were both completely consumed, the trees that were there. As you can see in the picture, Avista came in and put the trees on the ground. They're within reach of the utility. And the letter that they've sent is requested to clean up that at no cost to us, which I support that. So those 2 parcels are more or less devastated. They were not developed, but once the trees are cleaned up, they would be safe to pass and further develop if ever desired. Next slide. Willow Lake is 141 acres. Right off I-90 on Willow Lake, and it's our in-house arborist. We went and assessed it. It's about 90-95% complete devastation on all the trees. We have, because of the trees that have burnt, they're kind of in a dangerous state right now. There's also some sinkholes that are probably dangerous, and we have some erosion issues that are going to need to be addressed immediately on the property for rehabilitation. I've chatted with an outside forester, trying to set up a time to come assess the property, to look at reforestation, mitigation, see if there's any commercial value in the trees, all to be determined. We've reached out to the conservation district. They're a little bit consumed right now, but I hope to get them on site as well at some point in the near future. But that property is more or less a complete loss. No structures. There was a small park kiosk, but otherwise it's just native materials. And then the next slide just kind of highlights the request from Avista and their commitment to provide safe and reliable power with the removal of the debris that they put on the ground at Silver Lake, which they typically do not clean up behind themselves. So it's quite the opportunity. It would save us $500 to $5,000 and several labor hours to do ourselves.
So they're just gonna do the Silver Lake property because the power lines, not the Willow.
Yes, to my knowledge, there's no Avista utility through the Willow Lake, and I have not seen it since they put the trees on the ground, but I don't think they touched Willow. So it's just, yeah, that letter impacts Silver Lake specifically.
Thank you.
Any questions on Parks involvement? Yes.
Kyle is also working on some properties up north on the Oregon Road fire that Public Works, I think Public Works General Fund has.
It's general fund
General fund
property.
properties. And having a forester also look at those and look at it for commercial salvage operation for logging as well. So just highlighting that to possibly connect if there's an opportunity for us to leverage similar contracts on it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much of the Willow Lake property was forested. I mean, from the pictures, it looks like a decent amount of it was. I don't know if there's any commercial value to it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I hope to find out with our forester. That property was mostly forested.
Okay.
Just native ponderosas, which are probably low value, if any.
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you.
Do you need us to take a motion to allow you to agree with Avista?
We have a resolution coming before you next week.
Next week, okay.
That will authorize myself to sign the letter. On the letter, we currently identified the 3 parcels that we own, just in the event they were to do some cleanup on Willow Lake, even though we don't anticipate that at this time. And that will allow us, I think the deadline was the 12th, and you meet on the 10th, so we should be able to complete that, sign it, and have it submitted to Avista just in time and meet that time frame, if that's okay. And we're continuing to evaluate and determine next steps for either additional tree removal and restoration on these sites. So that's where we're at. Okay. And yeah, thank you very much. And I'll move on to our next item is specific to receiving grant funds related to our Rimrock to Riverside acquisition agreement. And Julie Neff has been kind enough to step in on this project that Mr. Knowles was working on and successfully had the successful grant application. So I'm going to turn it over to her. She has a quick little briefing on that to bring you up to speed.
Thanks, Doug. Good morning, commissioners. As Doug said, I'd like to give you a brief update on the Conservation Futures Rimrock to Riverside acquisition. As you just heard, Paul Knowles last year worked on this acquisition, helped facilitate it, and at the same time, he applied to the State's Recreation and Conservation Office for reimbursement of a significant portion of the funding. So I'm honored to be here to help complete the grant application process and close it out. So next slide, please. So as a reminder, the property is located just west of the city of Spokane. It's shown on the map in orange. And this is an important acquisition because it connects Riverside State Park to the north to Palisades Park and Indian Canyon Park to the south. In 2021, this was the #1 ranked property on the Conservation Futures prioritized acquisition list. It's 116 acres. It was acquired in June of last year. The purchase price was $1.45 million, and the city of Spokane has accepted ownership. Last August of 2022, the Board of County Commissioners authorized staff to apply for the RCO grant, and that would help fund nearly 50% of the acquisition costs. So next slide, please. Okay, so the county's grant application was successful, and next week Parks will be requesting your authorization to accept the grant award of $731,744. And if authorized, that funding would be used to reimburse the Conservation Futures Program for costs associated with the acquisition. Okay, next slide. So, thank you, and are there any questions?
Thank you.
And I believe a
It's exciting.
resolution is scheduled to come before
Next
you
week, yes.
next week to help move this forward.
Great, great. Thank you.
That's all we have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, Mike, we're running ahead of schedule, so hopefully you're there.
I am. Ahead of schedule's good.
Yes.
Okay, so commissioners wanted to, I guess I can kind of describe for you kind of what my thought process was on the legislative agenda process. Usually Commissioner CUNY, you just kind of let me go, so I'm just going to start kind of ramble through. Okay. Commissioner Jordan, too, you had asked me yesterday via email. I responded to you this morning. Sorry, I was traveling yesterday, but was going to relay all this information anyway. So just from a timeline standpoint, this is kind of where we are. I have spoken to all 5 of you individually about the legislative agenda for the coming 2024 session. When I did that, I took the 2023 agenda and we walked through it either via screen share or talked about it. And then took some notes on some additions you'd want to make, some things that were remove. In particular, had the most interest about capital projects, because I think that that's probably the most timeline sensitive thing for you all to discuss and come to an agreement on as to which projects you want to prioritize. Then we can begin the work to talk with your legislative delegation about those. This is a head start. Based on what we've done in years past. I think it's a better time frame to get it done earlier, and then gives us more time to do a date or two to present it to the Spokane County delegation. So from a timeline process, that's my thought. We do this today. I will be there in person with you in a couple of weeks. My hope would be at that point you can adopt a final agenda. And then obviously can make changes to it as things go on. There'll be some notes from, or some items from the Association of Counties once they finalize their agenda in November at their annual conference, which happens to be in Spokane. I know of 2 items that I'm pretty sure will be on their agenda that I don't know why you wouldn't support those. Those could be for discussion down the road. Maybe we can talk about them a little today. But that was my thought. So discuss this today, take more input, clean this up, present what could be a final version to you in a few weeks. At that point, you approve it. And then if we do need to make changes, we make changes as we get closer into January. And then, between that October 23 date and the end of the year, make available a few dates to meet with the delegation. This is your agenda. This is not mine. And so this is just my idea for a timeline to kind of push to get us to a point where we have something adopted. So does anyone have any issues with that timeline or any questions about why I'm thinking to do it the way I'm suggesting?
Do we historically have a way that we kind of ask the departments if they have any particular need for legislative action or anything to be included on the agenda?
Yeah, a lot of the departments to the individual, their associations are doing their own agendas through their different associations, like the Health District of Saufel, the County Administrators Group. So a lot of the ones that are not independent electeds, usually it's through that group. And all the independent electeds have their own associations that they put it through. So a lot of times, but then if there's something that rises to the top for somebody, and Mike, you can correct me, then they'll let us know to make sure that it's a priority for us, like parks, sometimes there'll be different things for parks and stuff, and so then they'll let us know. You know, because it's better for each group to be advocating, and then we can also advocate, but it's like, a special session isn't as, or the off-year sessions aren't as bad as the full-year sessions. I mean, there's so many bills that there's no way for, you know, Mike to be tracking or us to be tracking everything, unless it kind of rises to the top for us to really pay attention to, like, community services sometimes will have things, but they're also doing their own advocacy.
Commissioner Jordan, I could add too, in years past, we have asked your staff to ask your entire county staff. So when I say your staff, I mean the staff member that I normally talk to, I guess in this case it'd be Jeff, to reach out to county department heads. Hey, do you have anything? I didn't make that formal request this year, but usually what happens is those department heads will reach out to one of you or to Jeff, and then I hear about it. I do a meeting with them, kind of get the lay of the land of what they're asking for, and then suggest to them that they need to bring it to you all as commissioners to add it. So, you know, I'm certainly not gonna dictate your process, but if it was the desire of the board to reach out to your department heads between now and that October 24th date to get some extra input, I would certainly welcome that. But again, that is your call. But the answer to your question is yes, we've done that in the past. I didn't formally do it this time.
A few weeks ago, through the executive management team, I did ask them to reach out to all the groups that come up through them. So that would hit all departments that don't report to a separately elected. And then I've usually allowed the separately electeds, and they're always good at reaching out if they want us to kind of piggyback. So there's more than one group pushing something. But so the groups that do not report to separately electeds have been approached.
And a lot of times, like Vicky, you know, with elections and, you know, recording and stuff, she would, you know, they'll see it on the agenda, and so they'll come in and listen, you know, when we have our legislative updates.
Last year, we worked really closely with Vicky and the auditors statewide to do some fixes. I don't remember what they are now, but it was successful. I remember that.
It was the Citizens Commission.
That's right.
Yeah, it was big.
Thanks for the clarification on the association piece. That makes sense. I'm wondering, have we heard anything back from departments?
Not yet, no. I mean, the departments also know that what was on last year's agenda would move forward, and that would include both what was on our formal agenda and one-offs that were put in on behalf of departments or elected officials making specific financial appeals for specific projects. So those are all looped into this document already.
And a lot of times, you know, there's this kind of stuff that's kind of the stuff that we're talking about ahead of time, but then there's also, you know, once session starts, until you know what bills are coming forward.
Reacting.
Yeah, it's a reaction. Commissioner French, I see you.
Jump up and surprise us sometimes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. How's the best way to get some edits back to you, Mike, on this list? So I'm thinking about specifically, the natural gas prohibition legislation, change 23 to 24.
Right.
I have talked to a couple legislators. That is going to come back to the floor this upcoming session, regardless of the national or the litigation that's going on. But I've got additional financial requests that we've been working through Transportation Committee and a couple others. Do you want those now, or do you want them later, or what would you like to have?
Good question, Commissioner. I mean, I think if you bring that up as we go through this in the subject matter area, and then coordinate with, you can send it to me or to Jeff if your colleagues are in support of adding it. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, so I'm just looking, I've got about half a dozen items here that are going to be part of the request for this session and stuff. So some of them relate to the Gray Fire and financial support. probably also the Oregon fire. And I know that this is top of mind for the legislature, and so this is an opportunity to get some assistance for both of those areas. So adding that to the list.
Yeah.
And,
That sounds, I mean, good to me, Commissioner. Can I go through this and then if you want to
Yeah.
interject in the
Yeah, go
appropriate
ahead.
spot? Okay. So again, and Commissioner French is right. My date references here are not correct. We'll change those before we get them to you on the 24th. We've always had this statement about county fiscal health. This is not new language. If you have suggestions that you want to remove that or make additions to it, please do. On the next portion, the Blake decision, that again is old language. Commissioner Jordan, when you and I had spoken when we had our Zoom a month or so ago, whenever that was, you had mentioned that there was a briefing coming to you or to the county about this topic, and maybe there'd be some new material to add here. And am I remembering that correctly? And if I'm not, I apologize.
I'm not remembering that
Okay.
specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But this, again, dates are bad here, and I need to get kind of the updated kind of general county ask. So I will update that information. On the GMA side, when we had spoken, I think we can remove the riparian legislation. That issue has been, for the most part, worked out. More than one of you mentioned continuing to leave condo development regulations on this list. And then support for the legislation for the Cheney and Medical Lake, allowing the UGA swaps. I believe the Cheney issue is off the table, but I know that the Valley has one, or is that different than the Medical Lake one? Commissioner, please.
I think that if I could, my understanding is when we got the guidance from Commerce last year about land swaps, the language in the current RCW is so restrictive that
Yes.
it basically doesn't allow you to do a land swap.
Until you do the update.
Right.
Until you do the update. And then Commissioner French has a comment as well.
yeah, so I'm not sure why you think Cheney is off the list. Both Cheney and Medical Lake have approached me and said, hey, we still want to do the swaps. Help us get through this. And Commissioner Waldrop is accurate in that the current legislation is so restrictive that it basically doesn't allow you to do a swap. It just needs, the language needs to be cleaned up.
Gotcha.
So that the process is clearer and more predictable. Right now, it's a crapshoot and more heavy on the crap than the shoot.
Okay,
So-
Commissioner, I'm sorry. I thought I had heard from someone that Cheney had. I stand corrected. No reason to take that off.
Yeah, no, leave it on.
Okay, and I've exchanged emails with Scott Chesney about this, so he can help me. But at this point, this looks like this would be a bill to run, right? We would be proactively running a bill on this topic.
Yep.
Okay. I will work with Scott then to come up with language. Does that sound fair to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, the next one, the natural gas prohibition legislation. Commissioner French, it sounded like you had some additions there for your board's consideration.
Well, I know I've talked to a couple of legislators that anticipate bringing this legislation back to the floor. But the matter is now heading to court, federal court. And so whether they rely on the court to eliminate the prohibition or they do it by legislative action, that's unknown at this point. So I'd suggest keeping it on the list.
And I attended the GSI legislative agenda process last week. They're keeping this one on their list at this point also.
Okay, if it's the will of the board to keep it there, great. But is the verbiage correct here, or should we adjust this to reflect the position? And obviously the date needs to change. Understood, that's an easy one. But is this being described properly, or do you want to make adjustments to what it says?
So you've got it right there. That's,
Okay.
what is happening is that the Building Code Council is usurping the legislature. Legislature's gonna turn around and say, no, this is our decision, not yours. And there's gonna be legislation that'll foster debate.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. On to the next. Yes,
I would just
sorry.
say, Mike, that we would just want to, look at what GSI has for their wording as well, just so we're not in conflict with each other.
Okay, is that, can you help me with that, Jeff?
Will do.
Thank you.
I have a question on this one. So Commissioner French, what's your understanding of the legislation that you're hearing about, that it would basically take the authority back from the Building Code Council?
Yes.
Okay. Would we think about adding anything in here that relates to, if the legislature is going to keep regulations in place, that they would provide funding to support any changes that they're requiring, something along those lines?
That's an interesting approach. That has not been a topic of conversation, just because the dollar associated with this is Herculean. We're talking about B's with billions. And I'll give you, so they did it, Western Washington University did an assessment of what it would cost to convert from natural gas over to electricity. And the cost by a third-party independent analysis was $600 million for that one campus. And that forced a lot of the folks on the other side of the state to have a big gulp, because they don't know where they're going to find $600 million for. So, I mean, that's an interesting addition to this conversation, because that would force what a lot of people want to get on the table is the cost of this is going to be Herculean, and who's going to pay for it. So I wouldn't be opposed to that, no.
Well, maybe we could work on some ideas for language.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, is that, Jeff, is that something you can coordinate with the commissioners there
Yes.
for an additional, okay? The next one, the public building energy standards, you'll remember, we have talked about this bill last year, and the requirement for your buildings to be upgraded. Your staff gave a briefing on that. What the legislature did do was have a study group put in place to look at, it was more centric on state buildings. We need to see what the outcome of that is. So I'll work to change this narrative to reflect kind of reacting to what the study group says, but we won't know that till further into the end of the year. Do we still want to, I'm assuming we still want to leave this notation here, but just with different verbiage. Okay. Okay. I did put it in italics there at the bottom, the Spokane Valley land swap, so that we'll move that up to the GMA portion, because I put some of these here, I put in italics things that you had said to me in our individual discussions. Last year, left over from the legislative priorities for the Association of Counties, there was, you might remember there were 3 here. We removed 2 because they already passed, but the county jail costs, I understand that is an issue that's ongoing in Spokane County. Is that a notation that we want to leave to, depending on what the legislature does with this? If there even is a discussion this year on it? I don't know that there will be, but do we want to leave it on as an opportunity in case there is? Take advantage of an opportunity if it's available to us.
I would say yes.
Okay. Okay. So now we're on to the capital budget requests. The 4 items at the top that have the most detail are leftovers from last year. The 3 at the bottom are ones that I heard from one of you that I did not offer a lot of detail to, because frankly, we just didn't have a lot when we discussed it. I don't know what the best process is for you as a group to prioritize which one of these we want, knowing that, as Commissioner Cuny mentioned previously, talking a little bit more about policy bills, but going into a short session, supplemental budget's only a lot more limited in terms of what, the capacity within the capital budget. So, do you all have a consensus item that you've coalesced around that the county wanted to make an ask for? Maybe you haven't had that discussion. Can we have some of that now? And if we can't come to an agreement, can we do it in the next few weeks? So just kind of throwing this out in general as you look at this. And just because I have it on this list, you may have other ones that you've already heard of or that you've heard of since we spoke.
And Mike, I shot you an email this morning, the top one, the fairground roof, you can strike.
Okay.
Well, it didn't get funded last year. That's been fully funded through ARP. And it's actually in process right now. It's happening. So that funding window is closed.
Okay. But the other ones are still timely.
Yes.
In reality, the mobile home park one, that has just kind of continued to be something that the legislature has done. So not suggesting it wouldn't be one of your priorities, but maybe it's not a specific ask because it's kind of more of a nebulous, bigger ask. But.
Well,
Commissioner French?
Yeah, so let me talk about Fairchild. We do have an offer to acquire one of the mobile home parks out now and are moving forward with the acquisition of that, which will deplete the funds made available from the state. So if we are going to continue this effort, we need to replenish that fund. I think we've got 4.4 million. And right now the purchase on the mobile home park, just the park itself is at 4.1, and then we're going to have other associated costs. So, replenishing that fund is probably going to be critical if we're going to continue that effort. And then with regard to your wastewater lift station, I believe that is the lift station that the city wants to put in out at the West Plains to extend sewer service to the transload facility, and we would be in support of that effort. The airport and S3R3 are contributing money toward that, but that's going to be an ask for the city that we would be supportive of. And then again, the Four Lakes interchange is another one. We had that on there. The House and Senate approved funding for it, and the governor vetoed it. We've met a couple weeks ago with both the House and Senate, and they said, we see it as a priority. And so, bring it back and we'll continue to fund it. So I would put that back on the list as the Four Lakes interchange.
Is that, Commissioner, is that the same as Craig Road?
Yeah, it's just in the transportation section, Commissioner French.
Well, yes and no. Craig Road is the widening of Craig Road from, you've got it there, from US 2 all the way down to I-90. But in our conversations with transportation committees, they suggested breaking this apart. One, the dollar amount would be less. I think for what the money that we get in line for the feds and from the state, we could probably lower that $34 million ask down to around 15 to 16 million. So you've got the interchange, and then you've got the widening of Craig Road. And I don't think you're going to get both in this session, but so the Four Lakes interchange is the most important one of the two. And both the Senate and the House already approved funding for it. So this should be an easy lift for them. And they're looking forward to it coming back.
Okay.
And then the one thing that, I mentioned earlier, adding funding for relief for Gray and Oregon fires. I don't know where you want to put that at in this makeup, but I think that's clearly got to be a request for the state, since the governor is exhausted in his terms, the funds available to him. And then an ongoing effort to extend track for the transload facility. They funded another $1 million in the last session, and that gets us incrementally closer to where we need to be, but we need more funding to finish out that loop. That's about a $5 million ask. Those are the ones that I had.
Okay,
So Mike, I think, and then I'm gonna go to Pat, I think we need to, within this capital budget request, I think we need to identify what the county is actually asking for versus what we're supporting,
right.
providing support for. Because otherwise I think it gets too confusing as to, you know, if it's all on our list, then we may not get much, you know, that we need specifically as the
Yeah,
county. So
I mean,
think
for some history, commissioners, you'll remember the big one we got last year was the ballpark funding came
Yes.
through. So that was removed from the list, but there's an example of that one. And when we communicated with the delegation, we communicated that as a priority. So there's a way to do this. But you're right in that I always advise my clients to pick one or two that are their priority and then list the others that they support that are being done in their community, in your case, in your county. And also, I usually tell folks that you want to, generally speaking, you want to focus on your county assets that you're asking for. So if there's a county building, you'd certainly ask for that one. If there isn't a county building, maybe there is a project that you all five have coalesced around that you would support.
Yeah, because like the Shrek is not our building and the health district is not our building either. Those are both, would be independently owned from those organizations. Just, you know, things to think about. Okay, Pat, Bell, I see you've raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to what Mike said. I think that's great, counsel on picking one priority and being able to speak to the other projects, but having one on the top. I don't know what the dollar amounts are, what the delegation can bring back, but in this kind of a budget environment, in a supplemental, $1.5 million to $5 million, one legislator typically will bring back, you know, $500,000 to $1 million project, maybe a little bit more for the senators. So just something to think about in terms of the sizing. And then the other feedback to Commissioner French's point about fire relief. I did have a brief conversation last night with Luke Jasmine from the governor's office, and he mentioned the governor will be in town on the 12th again. It could be a good opportunity to just acknowledge the state funding that has already come from the individual assistance accounts or that is on its way from the governor, and then to initiate conversations with legislators to maybe get something included in the governor's budget, which I think comes out as soon as December, and to start those conversations with OFM requests and others about trying to get whatever that mark is in the governor's budget, with the hopes that the House and Senate would include it in their proposals come late January, February timeframe. So just adding that there's already acknowledgement there's going to be more funded needed and that those accounts seem to be depleted. So if there's another disaster between now and the end of the year before the legislature convenes, we basically are exhausting those accounts at the state level, is my understanding.
Well, I think the other thought, you know, Josh mentioned, and I think too, was to have a separate section for fire recovery. Because I think we've got, you know, funds that we need to seek, but we also have legislation, because I think in talking to Mayor Cooper, there's some wording to add wildfire as part of the emergency declarations on, you know, like, especially even at the federal level, as we look at what a federal agenda is, to, you know, to have it be included with hurricanes and tornadoes and such. So I don't know what we need to do at the state level for that. But it was also a discussion, and we can talk to Mayor Cooper some more about getting it at the federal level as well. So something just to kind of put on everyone's radar, and maybe have just a separate section for fire, so it highlights it for the state.
Yeah, Commissioner, I've had a few conversations with members of your delegation about fire relief. And the feedback I got was absolutely, we'll do what we can to help, being the legislator saying this to me, but need some specificity on what the need is, exactly what we're asking for, how much, where it goes, all, you know, a lot of detail in that. And I think you make a very good point in that having that be kind of its own separate section of your legislative agenda, because some of this could come out of the operating budget, some of it could be capital, and I'm not sure that we're in a position to make that request as to where it comes from specifically. A lot of these other projects and these other topics, that's just the way it's logically been done. This is a little bit different in that it's kind of I'm not saying it's a one-off, but it's outside of kind of the regular norm of what you would ask for. So I would agree, or not agree. I would suggest that would be a good way to do that when it comes to the fire request. So,
I mean, there's even been requests regarding the fire recovery, folks that are in close proximity to water, they're gonna have a difficult time rebuilding because of the proximity to water. Having some sort of land use legislation for some sort of exemption if you're rebuilding due to a natural disaster or something. So, I mean, it's not just money, it's not just, capital, I mean, it's policy as well.
Yeah,
But yes, but
to
we
come
need
up
those
with that.
details, yes.
So,
Yep.
so I think, Mike, that will be on us to do. So I've got
Yes.
Amber and Chris before I go back to Commissioner French. So Commissioner Mulder.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I think, Pat had some good points that we're in the short session. So we need to think about a capital ask that's reasonable. And then I guess I was gonna ask Mike, on the transportation side of things, how do you see that role? What do you see in terms of opportunities? I know we've had some different transportation funding recently.
well, you ask a good question, and when we got to transportation, I was going to bring that point up that I don't anticipate there being a new revenue package. So this is we're shifting. The state's always kind of shifting dollars around. As Commissioner French mentioned, the Craig Road project did receive funding, though it was in the out years and then was subsequently vetoed. So there are things that can be done in the transportation budget, but knowing that there is not a new round of revenue expected this biennium.
I was having a conversation with Luke Jasmine a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned there might be discussion around trying to create a more robust, state individual assistance program. I just wondered, Mike, if you'd heard anything about that, or if that was just kind of chatter.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I don't know who Luke is.
Luke Jasmine from the governor's office.
Oh, is he the Eastern Washington?
Yeah.
Gotcha. But when you say, was that specific to transportation?
No, like a disaster relief fund.
Oh, okay.
At the state level, almost like to
Similar
mirror
to-
FEMA, but to be more.
Well, I wonder if that won't be part of the governor's budget when it's rolled out in December. Because the governor's office is going through its budget process now. The agencies have all submitted their decision packages, which is their requests. And OFM's compiling those now and probably working through with the governor what exactly he'd want to do. But that would be a new thing. And I could see something like that being announced when the governor does his budget announcement in early December.
That could be something to support if it comes out as
Yeah.
a proposal.
But that'd be a good example of something as an add-on, later down the road. But I think Commissioner Walder's point is well taken in that, choosing one or two of these capital projects that you can coalesce around that would be at the top of our list. And then I would add on listing these others that you all would likely be supportive of, if it's a city request or an airport request or something like that.
Can I just add on? I was just going to ask, what does the board think is the best way to kind of identify what that fire relief need is? Is it talking to Chandra? Is it the recovery group kind of putting a proposal together?
I would think both, Chandra and the recovery group, and then whatever data Red Cross may have compiled. I think all of that will help us get to a more accurate number, but I would think certainly Chandra and the long-term recovery groups.
I think that topic would be very high priority, so.
And I think reaching out to Mayor Cooper to find out, what she's seeing the roadblocks are that she's, knows some legislation policy changes need to happen on. Okay, Commissioner French and then Pat.
Yeah, so one of the things, and I think it was Commissioner Waldron mentioned it, is the rebuilding effort, especially around water, the lakes, whether it's Silver or any of the other lakes. They're probably within the shoreline master plan setback area, and to be able to rebuild in there, I think they're going to be grandfathered in, but being able to get water and sewer to those lots, as opposed to having them try and reassess water on site is a challenge. And I know that Medical Lake is interested in extending sewer and water to those areas, but it's outside of the UGA. And so being able to get some legislation that would allow them to extend sewer and water outside the UGA to address national disaster areas, I think would be appropriate, and something that I think would be low-hanging fruit. So, supporting both the legislative ask as well as the financial ask for that would be, I think, appropriate to add to the list. With regard to the Four Lakes interchange and the conversations that I had with both Senate and House Transportation Committee members, they saw the value in that. They saw the argument, and that's why they funded it. That's also a project supported by Senators Cantwell and Murray and Congresswoman Catherine Whitworth Rogers, and that's where we've got the federal money from. Is from them and stuff. So their request of me when we met with them is make sure you include it as part of your ask this year so that we can circle back and get that funded. We see it as a priority, and it would have been instrumental in terms of being able to respond to the disaster, because that interchange, if you haven't ever used it, is a joke right now. It works really well if you go to Cheney, but it doesn't work if you're going anywhere else. So there's additional information for your consideration.
Thank you. Pat Bell.
I just wanted to go back to something Commissioner Jordan mentioned and Commissioner Waldron. So having lobbied in Olympia before alongside many of you, I think having one priority in each category, operating, capital, and transportation, makes good sense. And I'm sure Mike can advise on that. As it pertains to the operating budget, this disaster account that Luke Jasmine's talking about, just some legislative history, was created before the Malden fire. Actually, it just is one of those accounts that has sat empty for a long time. Typically, the state will apply to FEMA. As we know, we expect that disaster request to come from the governor soon. He'll likely only be asking for individual assistance at the federal level. But when those requests are denied, the ball starts to roll back downhill and would then fall on the state and the state resources. So I'm sure the governor already has some plan to replenish the account. But when the Malden fire hit, that account, just for awareness, was at zero, and took the governor some legislative wrangling to even get a few million into that account. Even with new revenues coming in, it's just tight and something the state hasn't traditionally planned for, to have funding, just like the county hasn't, it sounds like, traditionally had a disaster response account with, a fund balance. So I think to Commissioner Jordan's point, that's that's obvious next step, is either including it in your legislative agenda and then talking with the governor about the need, and I'm sure he would invite the board to reach out to legislators once it's been agreed to on the agenda. But I think he's looking to build legislative support for this account to replenish it, is my takeaway from what Luke Jasmine said.
Thank you.
And just a couple other thoughts. So building off of that, Pat, I don't know if there's more discussion on WASAC across the state around like resiliency around wildfire, wildfire resiliency planning, any dollars for counties to do better around how do we, do we need to have savings? Do we need to do other things to plan and address? And so I don't know if there's any work being done around asking the state for more support.
There isn't currently at WASAC, I know that.
Cause I mean, I know DNR's gotten a lot of funding
Federally,
over the last couple of years to up their, you know, their ability to fight wildfires, but I think at the county level, like what do we need to do to be ready and resilient and prepared? So that's just a thought. I don't know, just throwing it out there. Maybe it's more of a Wasatch conversation.
It's at our federal, I believe it's on our federal legislation agenda, but not at the state level. And Commissioner French, you're on LSC, so you can speak to it.
Yeah, so there are a couple efforts that are underway. One of them is through the legislature as a directive to the Building Code Council to create a wildfire interface zone or building standard. And so I know that work is underway, but then there's also conversations about trying to get additional financial support as well as interfacing with DNR with regard to those wildfire interface areas. So there are two conversations that are going on. We'll see which one survives.
So commissioners, I'm thinking, as I'm hearing this, at the beginning of the agenda where we have the county fiscal health and Blake and growth management, how about I try to write up a narrative about wildfire, because there is always, you know, legislation that deals with wildfire, and then the things that Commissioner French is mentioning, I'm aware of as well. If the governor's office is going to propose this new fund or replenishing existing funds. So maybe I could come up with a narrative that would be a catch-all for this and expressing your support. And then I could include some notations based on the conversation I've heard today of kind of some asks within the ask. So kind of have a broad one and then a few narrower ones underneath as part of that broad one. Does that sound, I think that's probably a good way to cover this and have it on your agenda as a catch-all for what may or may not come up this year.
Yeah, as long as we get very specific about it.
Yes.
And ask around the actual wildfire damage, you know,
yeah, and then
recovery that we need for the ones that have
right.
happened.
And then a parallel track will be you all getting me, and then in turn your delegation members in the governor's office, the detail exactly of what the ask is for and what it would do. So those would be two separate. We wouldn't put that detail on the agenda, I don't think, because that could be a pretty long document, I would think.
Could I just, one last thing, one area that's not covered in this document is anything around like affordable housing or housing. We did talk about condo legislation. I'm just wondering, Mike, what you think the legislature's appetite will be to fund more of the housing trust fund or opportunities to subsidize more affordable housing. I know that a lot has been done,
right.
Lots of different legislation has been passed over the last 5 years, but just wondering, is that still a hot topic, an opportunity area?
But so yes, it is still a hot topic. You're right though, in that there has been a lot of investment in that area. I do believe, and I've heard talk of a renewed focus by the majority, especially in the Senate, on behavioral health and how that interplays with the homeless issue and drug abuse and all those, you know, those different human service needs. So just because I didn't have it on there certainly doesn't mean you can't all agree to add it. But you're right in that a lot of investments have been made, but I do anticipate there to be more. You know, the need continues to grow, as I understand it. And so I think that's a worthy topic for you all to discuss.
Well, and I guess I just see today as kind of the start. There's probably going to be more things to get added, you know, having Under Sheriff Ritchie here. I mean, I know, you know, some of the pursuit bills and those, even though WASPIC does that, I think that's one of those that there's been a lot of discussion in the past, you know, to show our support for those. So there could be, you know, some other areas that show up, you know, like we said, in elections and here that we still want to put on here as things to top of mind for us as well.
Well, I was just gonna say,
The second one.
since the sheriff's department, was there gonna be a request for funding related to the new helicopter or any other capital requests? Just as we're on the discussion point.
Yeah, we're pursuing several different options right now. There's several different grant opportunities that we're in the process of applying for, and we haven't talked about asking for legislative appropriation or anything for any of that yet, but that's certainly something we can explore. I don't know how successful we'll be in the short session. Maybe something we go for next year. Yeah.
And it might be worth putting, again, just having it on our list.
Sure.
So that way it's, when it comes back next year, it's something that, we had it on, it didn't get funded, we're looking for funding.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the sheriff would be fully on, support of that, so.
Well, but Commissioner's kind of trying to steer you back to the capital budget specifically. Maybe you're not in a position today that you do have one topic there that maybe you all need to talk further about this, but to come up with one or two, excuse me.
Yes, I would agree. I think, like I said, this is a good start for us to start to have that conversation and start to identify what really the needs are, because a lot of times courthouse renovations too kind of come under this, or can come under another grant program for the historic courthouses. So I think we need to look at that too for opportunities.
Okay. So then at some point you'll need to come up, have a process or a discussion to narrow this down.
Yes. So we will put it on for next week to have a continued discussion.
I'll work with you, Mike, on getting some stuff put together for next week to continue.
Okay, that's, yeah, great. And then,
And I think it's important, like you were saying, Chair CUNY, to have what the county's top asks are, and then what are the other asks that we're supporting with our organizations that we work with, like SHREC or, yes, Health District.
and then you should,
There's kind of two levels there.
then we should probably do the same process with the transportation requests, unless you all feel confident that you, and maybe you aren't at a point where you can grab one of these now.
Yeah, we've not had the discussion yet, Mike.
Okay.
So we need to have.
Yeah, okay, so then I'll work with Jeff to make some changes to this, and then we'll keep working at it. And we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. It sounds like we'll be talking again next week, so thank you for your time.
The start is always the hardest part, so thanks for getting us started.
Got it.
There are no bad ideas.
So then that's gonna take us to Jeff before we get to you, if that's okay.
So, Rebecca, if Bill Clark or Peter Dykstra is on, can you promote them up? They're both from Trust for Public Lands. So this is the Spirit of Mount Spokane Conservation Project. You've all seen the letter that came around requesting support. Gina passed out a new letter that had all 5 signature lines on it. So briefly, this is a 6,500 acre between Mount Spokane and the state line. It does continue into Idaho, but we're dealing with the Washington side. I've talked with Kevin Rassler, the CEO of Inland Empire Paper. They're fully supportive. So the paper company would still own and manage the property for commercial timber and resource management purposes. It does not affect the tax base. Existing taxes will stay the same. It does complement our comprehensive plan. It certainly plays into the Rathdrum Aquifer for some water protection. It does allow, it permanently secures all the recreational activities you would expect: hunting, hiking, biking, wildlife viewing. So those are kind of the high level how it works. So it's kind of a win-win. It gives some public access lands without us having to purchase those lands. So no taxpayer money is involved with this one. There is some funding at the federal level to administer it. That comes from offshore oil and gas leases. So you could argue it displaces other money. I'm not gonna, no. No direct taxpayer funds. So this is just a letter of support that they are asking the county to sign. From the feedback I've got, it seems like these are usually considered win-wins from all political spectrums, but we do have Bill Clark or Peter Dykstra available if you have questions.
So one question I have is this on the consent agenda? I mean, I'm having a letter here, so is this?
Generally, if you guys have just given a unanimous head nod for a letter, we'll sign it.
Well, no, you usually won't
You
have
want a
to
full
do.
resolution with it?
I mean, usually we're gonna all sign
We
a
usually
letter.
make a motion at least to sign it. But as you,
Which then I have
as
to
you
open
know,
up for public comment. If it's not on our consent agenda, then it's, so is it,
So whichever way you prefer.
I guess my question is, do we need to have it, is next week okay, or does it have to happen this week? So Mr. Dykstra.
Yeah, great. Good morning, everybody. Where we are is we're in a grant process. So the letter is to DNR, and DNR will submit the application to the U.S. Forest Service later this month. I think if we are able to tell DNR that we just have to go through process, get public comment, and get it next week, I think that would be okay. I'd be happy to communicate that if that's what the commission feels is the best way to meet all of your obligations and needs.
Yeah, I mean, I think if that's okay, we can approve it today by making a motion and opening it up for public comment, or just have it on next week's consent agenda, and then it's just part of our consent agenda to just sign the letter of support. And if you don't need it till the end of the month, then that next week's mid-month, and you can let them know it will be coming.
Yeah, so just to clarify, they need to submit by the end of the month. So I'd like to let them know as soon as possible that they have the stack of support letters we have. But I think next week would be fine.
Okay.
So put it on for next Tuesday consent.
Yes. Yes, that way we can all sign it then. Okay, perfect. It sounds like it's an exciting project. I don't know, since you're on, if you'd like to comment about it.
I don't want to take a lot of time. I know you've got a busy agenda. I think it is. I think Jeff did a great job of describing the opportunity here. What it really does is allows Inland Empire to continue owning and managing these forest lands while also providing public access. And it's the kind of project that the Trust for Public Land, who I work for and used to be staff for, have done all over the country. We've done a bunch in Montana, some in Idaho, a lot on the west side of Washington. What I think is particularly exciting about this is it would be the first Washington state forest legacy easement on the east side of the state. And you have a lot of important forest land that I think deserves to be maintained as working forest land. And this is a really phenomenal tool for forest landowners to use if they're interested in it. So I think it's exciting that it's a big project. It's land that covers both portions of Washington and Idaho. We're really, really excited to be doing this work with Inland Empire, and I know they're super excited about being able to cover all of the lands that they've been working on with us under conservation easement through this program.
Great. Thank you. Well, we look forward to getting that signed next week then.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So then next, Kevin Ritchie,
All right, well, I've got some good easy ones. It's free money, right?
and we're like right on time.
Right. The first one's a resolution accepting a grant from the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission. It's federal dollars that are passed to the state, and then they distribute them throughout the state to law enforcement agencies for traffic enforcement. This is the Target Zero high visibility emphasis patrol. These are overtime dollars that our traffic unit specifically uses to go out and do extra patrols in high visibility, high traffic areas. So last year they received about $28,500 worth of grant funds from the same Target Zero, or from the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission. And they did things like impaired driving, directed patrols, the click it or ticket, speed enforcement. There's a motorcycle enforcement thing that they did. So they use those dollars to go out and just basically do extra enforcement. So we're just asking that for the resolution to accept the grant. It's $19,000 this year so far.
And Target Zero is just to try to have zero deaths.
Zero deaths, yeah, that's the state's program for zero deaths throughout the state on the highways. And I'm sure you're all aware, I think this year is one of the highest fatality so far in the state. I believe so far this in history. Or since the 70s. It's really, it's been a bad year.
Excuse me.
Any questions on this one? Before I move on to the. All right, and then the next one is the the WASPIC behavioral health grant that we apply for every year, and we've been operating since 2017. It's our co-responder program where we send out clinicians with patrol officers that specifically go to crisis calls and mental health calls. We have some recipients of the grant, so Spokane Police is a partner with us, and we they get, I have the numbers here, they get about it's around $700,000 from us, and that covers about this year, this grant cycle will cover 4 full-time positions and some overtime and some travel and training. Another sub-recipient is Frontier Behavioral Health, and this grant will fund 4 clinicians. If you're familiar with the program in the past, the grant has funded 6 positions with SPD and 7 positions with Frontier. And this year they reduced the funding because we haven't been able to fill those positions, and so there was leftover grant dollars. They wanted to be able to spread those dollars throughout the state. And so what they did basically is gave us a pool of money this year to draw from, and they don't fund specific FTEs anymore. They're just going to give us a blank, $289,000 for personnel, and we're going to draw that down throughout the year, and that covers overtime and all the and fringe benefits is another $137,000, so that covers the benefits. But they don't want to fund specific FTEs this year; they want to fund hours, and so we're going to have to do a lot better job of reporting our hours and the specific hours that we've spent doing behavioral health related emphasis and calls. So same with the city of Spokane. So they're going to have to address it. I don't know what they're going to do as far as staffing. I don't know if they're just going to fund it themselves or if they're going to go after additional money. But so far, I haven't heard any decisions from them. So any questions on this?
So how much for Spokane? I mean, I know the full grant comes through Spokane
Yes.
County and then we sub it out. But how much is Spokane County versus City of Spokane?
Spokane County is for our personnel. Let me add it up here. They have it broken down into sections. So.
And then do we think, because I know we had a hard time, as you said, staffing the counseling side. Do we think we have, is it getting better?
It is. So traditionally they've the requirements are master's level clinicians. They lowered the WASPIC grant. Actually submitted if you remember last year I came back and had a new grant assigned. They submitted, or they lowered the requirements, and so there's a much broader range. There's bachelor's level clinicians, and there's I was learning more about how you get certified to be a clinician for mental health than I've ever thought I would know, but there's different ways of doing it, and so there's different training programs, and so they've opened it up so Frontier can go out and recruit different levels of clinicians, and I believe they're up to 4 now, and for a while there we were operating with 1 or 2, so they are doing better. It's still a challenge, and I think it's the same challenge we're facing. You know, it's finding qualified applicants that want to do this type of work for this type of money. You know, it's just it is what it is, and so but they are doing better. And so the grant, the award for Spokane County for this year would be $437,675. And that will cover our 3 positions, fringe benefits and training. And we weren't cut at all as far as Spokane County's award, because we've actually been pretty good at filling all of our spots and using 100% of the dollars. It was Spokane Police and Frontier that saw some reductions.
Kevin, I think Justin Johnson was helpful in assisting the sheriff's office, working with Frontier Behavioral Health on changing some of those requirements to loosen it, to get us the proper people in here, if I recall.
Yeah, absolutely. I had some meetings with them, and then I know they met, and initially it was actually from law enforcement. It was kind of a pushback because they didn't want to lower the standard or the level of the training, because it's pretty important to us that we're offering the best service possible, and so we want that master's level clinician. But throughout the state, throughout the country, a lot of the frontline street level co-responders are bachelor's level and other certifications, and they do a really good job. And so we were able to kind of work that out using his help, and so that it has freed things up, and it's allowed for some progress in hiring.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I think Justin also pushed on Frontier on their pay scale, because you have to have competitive in order to get folks into those positions. So I appreciate Justin. He worked really hard on trying to make all those changes. So thank you as well.
Absolutely, addressing the pay was one of the key issues, and I think they did a pretty good job of doing that.
Do we have any data on how many calls are being responded to, things like that?
I don't have that
at the appropriate time. I know.
I can send that to you. We do a monthly and a quarterly report that has the hours worked, and it has diversions. So it has how many people contacted and how many actually either ended up going to jail or went to other the hospital or other facilities. One of the goals of this program is to not only not go to jail, but is to free up time in the emergency room as well too, because that's not necessarily the appropriate place for people in crisis. So that's a stat we show too, is how many were diverted away from the hospitals, and then it's a pretty impressive number.
If you could send some, that'd be great.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we could get a presentation. I remember Under Sheriff Knowles came in and gave us a presentation a while back, and your guys' diversion numbers were through. I mean, it was crazy how many people that you diverted away from the jail. I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, the numbers really show that the program works. So.
I have a presentation I could give us anytime you want, because I just when I applied for the grant, I had a presentation and it had all these numbers in it.
I'd love to have you guys back in. I mean, it just really shows how effective the program is.
It is an impressive program, and I always, we're taking people off the road. You're taking deputies away from patrol units and police officers away from their patrol units, and you're doing a specific thing, but it's really a force multiplier, because they are handling a workload that regular patrol would have to handle, and they're not equipped to handle it. And the default was take them to the hospital, and that's why thousands of people went to the hospital who probably didn't need to go to the hospital, or in jail. They didn't need to go to the hospital or jail. They need services, and so this program, I would like to see it expanded. It's difficult to do that with staffing issues, but it really takes a lot of burden away from patrol, and it's a great service to the community.
Make sure we get them back on the agenda.
Yeah, I would just say what Kevin said was reinforced by Justin yesterday, talking about the code of play teams, talking about removing the burden off of the emergency rooms and getting them into the proper location for meeting the needs of the individual.
Yeah, I think he was talking about adding the 2 fire as well. That's already happened in police.
And I believe there are co-responders with fire currently. I believe not as many as with law enforcement. And this is all funded by True Blood dollars. Sorry. So, and I know there is more money on the table. They just haven't decided where they're going to put it yet. So there's more opportunities for additional funding.
Well, I think it'll be good to see, because I know that there was a gap with hiring those social workers. So So it'll be interesting to see what the plans are on it.
One other thing to point out, this is a 2-year grant this year. They're gonna do 2 years in a row, but the money or the dollar amounts I gave you was for year one, but the total award for both years is $3,576,541.
Thank you.
Any-
I'm not seeing any other questions.
Thank you.
Great job. We'll see you back soon. Okay. We got the whole team here.
Yes, we do. We have a few items to brief this morning. The first is a relatively quick and easy one. Rob Lindsay is going to talk about our agreement with West Valley School District.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a feel-good item. I like this one a lot. We've been partners with West Valley School District and specifically the Outdoor Learning Center for, well, longer than I've been at the county, which is coming up on 20 years. So we, as Spokane County, are very lucky to have an aquifer protection area that funds our education program. And we're statewide leaders. We really are in terms of our education and outreach program. And that's very much due to our ongoing partnership with the West Valley Outdoor Learning Center, which we reached out to them when we developed our resource center. And we took their advice and their consent and advice and not consent, but in terms of, what sort of project, what sort of exhibit should we have, what would the curriculum look like? They really helped us develop a program that brought value to the education system. It encouraged us to develop curriculum that meets Common Core standards and makes us relevant. And so this particular agreement, it's very routine. We update it every couple of years. And we're seeking your approval to re-engage our relationship with the West Valley Outdoor Learning Center. This year, we have a little added bonus to it. Our team was able to receive a grant from the State Recreation Conservation Office as part of the No Child Left Inside initiative, where we'll receive about $2,000 of pass-through funds that will go through our program. And we actually provide kind of foundational support services for this No Child Left Inside program, because we'll provide the facilities to support these education programs, but it'll be pass-through funding to West Valley Outdoor Learning Center to help them participate with us. So, again, I ask you to support the Aquifer Protection Area program and our ongoing relationship with West Valley Outdoor Learning Center.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah. I would also add that the Aquifer Protection Area funding mechanism is going to expire in 2025. And we are now having discussions internally about renewing that Aquifer Protection Area funds. They're vitally important.
So when does it need to be on the ballot?
It would need to be on the ballot late 2024.
So August or November?
August is what we would ideally shoot for. It makes more sense economically. And also, we just would prefer not to have it part of a general election. Which means that we would need to have the documents prepared and ready by May of 2024.
Right.
And we've been talking to Randy about this, and our financial person, Shannon Durkee, and Kyle's involved in this as well.
And the election, the elections department. So, just as former employees of that area, it doesn't mean that they're getting the information. So I would make sure you guys are talking directly with the elections office. Because again, it'll be a ballot title that will have to go through the process, and we saw some of the challenges with that. So I just want to make sure that, that all is getting through legal, and going through the right channels.
A pro and a con group say
Yeah,
someone would have to,
I would
I mean,
assume so.
it's all new stuff around ballot measures that wasn't there even 2 years ago, so.
And we do these about every 20 years, so we have lots of institutional knowledge.
There's a lot of new stuff.
Yeah, this is new for all of us, so.
No, so I mean, so it's
a
wise
big
to be
lift.
starting now and thinking about it now. So that way we make sure that everything gets done, so. Chris, if you can put that on your agenda to be talking to your groups that would be helping them.
And I certainly will. I know Commissioner French had brought this up earlier, so I already had at least a portion of this on my agenda. He had mentioned adding a West Plains aquifer protection program as well that we've just started scratching the surface on.
Commissioner French?
Well, there's no need for me to comment because he just raised the issue that I was going to raise, so thanks.
So there are several components of this that we will need direction from the board on. The amount, the area we would put forward, if we're going to expand that area, certainly discussions about West Plains. Do we want to look up north? There's some other elements to this that we would need commissioner direction on to move forward with, and also that is in partnership potentially with our the other municipalities in the area and their participation. We've heard loosely that the city of Spokane Valley is very interested in moving forward with a renewal. The city of Spokane as well. So lots to discuss and what we think is the best proposal to put forward.
So I think that would be a good workshop, for us to do that, and then kind of seeing I think, some of the questions for me would be, because it's a 10-year.
20.
So it's been over the last 20 years, kind of what the revenue has generated, kind of what that area was in that last one. Because I know it was it's not countywide. I think, and the city of Spokane didn't participate.
Not in the second one. This is the third one. There was one in 1984, one in 2004, would be going again in 2024. And in the middle one, the 2004 version, the city opted out. The 84 version they were in. And this one, we think they're likely to join back in.
So I think it's just kind of knowing, having that history and background, and then just what was funded out of it. And then what we hope to fund, not in extreme detail, but what do we hope to fund out of it? So that way the citizens, again, know kind of what a general idea is.
Absolutely.
I can tell you generally that money that this is providing funds to Liberty Lake and to City of the Valley, because the APA funds are being used to support the water resources program and the education program. And then any funds that are left over go back to these communities, and they've been using those funds primarily for their stormwater services. And I know that they've been appreciating that.
So Commissioner French, your hand's up again.
Yes, so with regard to the action for the city in 2004, I actually led that effort to pull the city out of the APA. And it was because the original intent was to eliminate septic tanks over the aquifer. And the city had already reduced the number of septic tanks down to, I think, maybe 1 or 2 mobile home parks that they had funding to be able to achieve. So, but this is a whole new environment with protecting the aquifer with chemicals, forever chemicals and stuff like that and stuff. So I'd be fully in support of being able to not only reauthorize the APA, but also extending it to the West Plains and potentially up north, because this is about protecting our drinking water, much like it was back in '84 when we were trying to eliminate septic tanks. Now we've got septic tanks eliminated, but we've got other chemicals to deal with.
Yeah, and I do support, and I think part of it's for education as well, correct?
Absolutely.
So then that would also help with the Salties Flats area, because feeds into the aquifer there.
It can support the educational component of what we do at Salties.
And we discussed previously when as we transition into a solid waste topic right now, our landfill closure account's running dry. Landfill closure is certainly something that has a direct correlation to our aquifer, and making sure that we're able to maintain those effectively.
a good strategic planning item to get on earlier than later.
And is it voted on only by the individuals who would be in that zone? So it's not a county-wide vote?
Unless you
Correct.
wanted it to be.
But then the protection area would also be countywide, though?
Correct.
Okay.
So we need some legal.
We can draw the boundary by voting district.
So yeah, no, sounds like there's several workshops to discuss kind of what the reality would be. Once you kind of have thought through it yourselves.
Thank you, look forward to it.
Thank you. So hopefully, like in another month, I mean, because it's like, it's gonna,
Yeah, yes.
okay, that'd be great. Okay, so then I think that takes us to Deb.
Deb Geiger here is the head of our solid waste section, to talk about our, the RFP we did for the transfer station operations and disposal and our next steps moving forward.
Yes, good morning, everybody. So our current contract for transfer station operations and maintenance is up in November 2024. So we went out for bid this spring, request for proposal on transfer station operations and maintenance, as well as disposal. We added disposal of a portion of our garbage into this contract because it would bring more competition to the table. It's not a very attractive, I guess, job for a lot of vendors to just do transfer station operation and maintenance. So on this one, we included disposal. The services we requested, that's hard to say. Facility operations and maintenance. We also have what we call household hazardous waste operations, where we take in free HHW from residents. We also have organics operations, which is yard waste, food waste. And then we also asked them to propose costs and services on transportation of the material to where it's going to go, and then the actual disposal for a portion of our waste. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but about 55% of the tonnage that currently is collected at our transfer station of MSW goes to a landfill. And the current contract is with the city of Spokane.
So just for a little bit of clarity on that, so in essence, we top off the waste to energy facility to make sure that it's running at full capacity at all times. And then our excess gets bypassed along with any excess that the city may have, and their ash is all in that same bypass contract, whatever exceeds the capacity of the waste energy facility. So that has been our historic practice, to simply basically give it all to the city, then the city then includes it with their bypass component. But in order to make our proposal more attractive, what we're basically saying is we keep the waste to energy facility full, and then our vendor will actually take care of the balance of it. So that is what is a change to our past 10-year practice to our proposal that we just received bids.
Hi, Commissioner French.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So a question for Kyle and Ms. Geiger. I recently discovered that evidently the city has decided at the end of November, I believe, they will no longer accept large animals for disposal at the waste energy plant. That creates a problem, obviously, for the ag industry in terms of how to dispose of those animals. But and Baker Commodities, that used to render the animals, is no longer providing that service and stuff. So really would appreciate, I think we've got a meeting for Friday too. That's what the topic is what do we do? How are we going to handle those carcasses? So just put that on your radar for conversation for Friday.
Thank you. Next slide. And we'll look into that. I know that's been an issue back and forth for the last couple of years, so Okay, so we did, for our RFP proposals, what we did was we had scoring criteria developed. We worked with HDR Consulting to do our request for proposals, and we had 4 different categories or criterion that we scored on. Method of approach was basically how the company was coming at it, what their operations plan was, their staffing plan, the types of equipment and availability of things they were going to do. Experience and financial stability. We also looked at sustainability. What's the impact as far as a carbon footprint? And then overall, 40% of our criterion were on value and cost and the impacts to county. So those were our scoring criteria. And if we go on to the next slide. For the bid evaluation process, basically purchasing went through initial screening for responsiveness. And then we had 2 different committees to make sure we're open and transparent with our scoring. And we had a technical scoring committee that basically went through all of the documents, and they were very large bid proposals. We scored them, and then we had an evaluation committee that looked over the scoring, had the documents available to be able to kind of look through and make sure they concurred with what the scoring team did. So that was our process. We just finished that last month. So next slide, please. Just for your information, we had 41 solicitations online that we sent out. We only received 2 bid proposals, and we ranked them. Just so you know, rank number 1, highest scoring was Waste Management, and the current contractor ranked number 2. Next slide. For the ranking, I just want you to know that, both firms were competent. Both firms had good scores. Waste Management just consistently scored higher in all categories except sustainability. And that's because their site did not have landfill gas capture yet because it is a brand new site. The scoring committee did take a trip to the Waste Management's proposed site because it is a brand new landfill in Adams County. So we wanted to make sure there was actually a landfill there, and there is. So
you saw it with your own eyes.
Yes. Yep. That should be operational the first quarter of 2024. And so what we're asking is for the board to approve our ranking and our recommendation. We'd like to enter into negotiations with Waste Management. This isn't a contract yet. We're just wanting to sit down at the table and see what kind of costs we can come up with in services.
So just a little bit more detail on that. So because this is a 10-year contract, and it's a very robust agreement, we're expecting comments back on the terms of the agreement. We're expecting some negotiation. They have kind of outlined pricing of what's in their initial proposal, but we're going to get down into the minutia of that, negotiate over certain terms and contract provisions, and then be coming back to brief the board again on some considerations with regards to that versus an alternative.
Okay, and just going back to the services, so this is separate then, because they do our pickup as well, Waste Management, or WM does. And so this is separate than that contract. Chris is just hauling the bare material. Correct. And Republic didn't respond?
They did not. They had an ample opportunity, but they did not respond.
Yeah, just interesting. And I think the city just went with Waste Connections.
For their ash.
Yeah, so, interesting, okay.
No, Waste Management can't take the ash,
Waste Management can't,
not for ash.
not for ash.
Landfill has to be specifically permitted to accept that.
Okay, and because Waste Connections, they're actually hauling down to Oregon? Or is that just their ash?
Yeah, the ash, correct.
Is there solid going down there as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just lots of questions. Actually, I've toured one of the site down in Klickitat County and talked to commissioners down there as to how they're landfill works, which is very interesting. So,
Yeah, I've been to that one, it was pretty neat.
yeah.
If you can call a landfill neat.
Yes, exactly. So no, I'm moving forward with the waste management, or WM.
It's harder to say WM than it is waste
I know.
It's both locations, right? Both transfer stations?
That's correct.
I think, yes.
It's for both. So if this all comes to be and they sign the contract, how does the transition work from one operator to the other to make sure that happens seamlessly and there's not a sort of lapse in service there for our constituents?
Yeah, it's actually surprising how smoothly it goes. When the county took over the transfer stations and developed a contract with Waste Connections in 2014, it happened in a day. Waste Connections came in and replaced whatever city employees that were leaving. Some of the city employees stayed on with Waste Connections, and it was seamless. So they're very good at it.
And there's a provision about the staff as well, correct?
Yes, yeah, there is a provision in our current contract where any of the employees that are currently working on our sites are allowed to enter into agreement to work for the next contractor.
And so the Scale House side of it,
That was my next
you know, with the treasurers, so how does that work?
That's stays the way it is. Right now, we are actually working to move from treasurers into solid waste, that team. So that's more of a transition, I think, that it would be with waste management.
So the treasurer's office won't be providing the employees for the Scale Houses any longer?
The same staff we're working on an agreement through HR for those staff to, and this is all in cooperation with the treasurer's office for those staff to be public works employees.
Okay.
It's been a lot of management for them to sit here, right, and kind of a weird offshoot, so to speak, of what the treasurer's office would do. So Public Works and Treasurer have been working together to figure out what makes the most sense. Public Works essentially is already funding the department, right? We're doing adjustments to fund that anyways. And so the question really has become, does it make sense for Krista Rice to be running out there if there's an issue, or would it make more sense for it to live in Public Works? So they've been working on that piece. HR is involved on the employee piece. So as soon as they reach their agreement on finalizing what the transition of dates will look like, we'll wrap up the back end on just the people side of things, but it won't affect wages or working conditions or anything like that. It's just a structure change on which department they'll report through.
Okay. Seeing any other questions on that? So this will end up on the agenda next week for.
Yes, we have a resolution ready to go.
Okay, great.
One more solid waste item for you.
Okay, yes, you get double duty here today with me. I just came before you to get approval on our local solid waste financial assistance funding. This is a biennial grant from the state. It comes from the Model Toxic Control Account. Every local government agency receives these if they have comprehensive planning element and they have a SWAC. And they apply for it. But it supports our local solid waste planning, 2-year grant. We are required to put in 25 match requirement or 25% match requirement, which is very easy. I mean, it comes right out of our operations for diversion or recycling, HHW, so we have no issues with that. And it assists us with all of our program responsibilities and mandates that are required by the state. The grant is this biennium $1,016,000 around that, and that's not including our match. So it's very helpful for our operations. We put a good percentage of it towards organics diversion. Next slide, I think, shows the programs. So the allocation, we have 3 tasks that we put money towards. We do our moderate risk waste collection and management, or household hazardous waste. We help fund our organics management, the yard waste, and then recycling operations at our transfer stations. And Each one of these tasks includes the education outreach element that we do for each component, and then our allocation is, again, just over $1 million for the biennium. Just here to ask for your approval when the resolution comes across your desk next week. Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate everybody.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have with me Mr. Stromberger, and he is going to present on pretrial services. And this is kind of an ongoing process that we're going to go through, which is have my departments kind of provide updates to the board. And so this is the beginning of the first. You're the lucky one.
I am, thank you. Well, thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, everyone, for having me. My name is Aaron Stromberger. I've been with pretrial services since 2011. Became the manager this last February. So just give a brief overview of our department. We have 11 and a half full-time employees. 7 and a half of those are pretrial service officers. We have 1 mental health professional, 2 administrative assistants, and then myself as the manager. We are a 7-day-a-week operation, 363 days a year. Just going into our first slide here, one of the biggest products that we give to the courts is our first appearance evaluation. This is an impartial investigative report prepared for the court prior to the defendant's first appearance. So it gives a complete snapshot of a defendant's criminal history, their background, their ties to the area, employment, etc. For Superior Court, from January to August, we wrote 3,222 evaluations. That's about 400 evaluations a month. For District Court, we provide those reports for new DUI, new domestic violence arrests, and we're turning out over 1,000 evaluations since the start of the year. So, about 525 first appearance evaluations per month. These are rather labor-intensive reports. We're doing nationwide criminal history searches. We're really giving our judges the full depth picture of who's in front of them in court that day. And what the courts have told us and what we see is they do rely heavily on our reports when they're making their release decisions. So I think we're doing really good work there. That's our biggest product. Next slide. Now, coming out of those first appearance hearings, judges can elect to release defendants to our monitored release program. And what our monitored program tries to do is, or attempts to do, is provide oversight for defendants that are released pending trial. These are pre-trial stage defendants. We don't do any post-conviction work. And we're really geared towards addressing the risk of pretrial failure, fail to appear in re-arrests. So as part of our monitored release program, we're providing participants needs assessment, pointing them towards resources in the community. We give them court date reminders. If they do happen to miss a court date, we're tracking them down. We're doing fail to FTA follow-ups, trying to help them maintain compliance with their court-ordered release conditions. And the beauty of this program is it gives the court one more option instead of just release or hold on bond. It gives them one more release option where we're keeping our eyes on these defendants while they're in the pretrial phase. They do report to us on a scheduled basis, usually about 2 times per month, either in person or by phone. Current monitored caseload is about 220. We have seen a reduction since the Blake decision that took away a lot of kind of that low-hanging fruit for releases. So we have seen some dip in that, but I will say in the last month it has started to ramp back up. And on an average year, carry over from the year before and the current year, we're monitoring about 800 felony level defendants on our monitored release program. And just to give some basic stats of what we typically see out of the Superior Court, about 68% of our defendants are held on bond, 21% are OR'd or released on their own recognizance, and then the remaining 11 are put on our monitored release program. So we've seen 309 released to our monitored release program from January to August. Yes.
Aaron, on the monitored release, these are felonies coming from Superior Court. Is this a condition to release? Is it in lieu of bond? Is it voluntary? Is it non-voluntary?
Yeah, great questions, thank you. Yeah, this is in lieu of bond, they are released. People who are held on bond do not also have the option to be on monitored release. It's one or the other, so this is a release option. It is a condition of their release. It is not voluntary, so they are required to check in with us regularly, maintain all of their court order conditions, and reappear for court. So we do send violations if they are not complying with the conditions of monitoring, and then it's up to the prosecutor what they want to do as far as revoking release or not. We're just a reporting agency. And then, I'm sorry, your last question.
I think you got it. It was really a condition to release. So is there a difference between how felony releases and stipulated condition is handled versus a misdemeanor? And I'm trying to understand the supported release, which is through district court, and the fact that's voluntary only, and I think as the data's been being tracked, not by your office, but through district court, and through, I think it's Pioneer, it's a very poor compliance rate, and I don't know if it relates to the voluntary nature of it or not. So I don't know if you know, I was under the impression that the district court was saying they couldn't place a condition for being part of the supported release, yet clearly this is a condition imposed by the court, even though it's pre-trial.
Correct. You've highlighted the big difference between those two programs. On the felony side, monitored release is mandated, is a condition of their release. And my understanding on supported release, it is voluntary. They don't get their release revoked if they don't follow through with the supported release program. I don't want to say conditions, but options. I think another thing we've touched on in some meetings is the beauty of our program is everything's right here on site, right here in the campus. Somebody gets released from the jail, they can literally walk right to our office, get checked in. They know where we're at. When they come to court, they can check in with us. We're located right here. And so I think even the city's seeing some success on their side because everything's on site. So maybe just speculating, but I think, with Pioneer being off-site versus us being right here on the campus, contributes to some of our success.
Do you know if there's anything precluding district court from having a similar pretrial condition monitored release as opposed to a voluntary?
I don't believe there's anything precluding them. In fact, not that long ago when our office was funded in large part by the MacArthur grant, we were monitoring for district court. We were taking, and actually municipal court as well. We were more of a region program, and we were monitoring a lot of misdemeanor level defendants. And that was, just like Superior Court, part of their court ordered release conditions. So we could send violations and they could have their release revoked based on non-compliance. Now that's all gone away because the MacArthur grant is largely done with our office. So we've gone back kind of where we were before the grant started. We're just serving Superior Court for our monitored release program. So, but long story, I don't believe there's anything precluding them, but we're not doing that service for them at this time.
There's a reduction in staff.
And as part of it, okay, so that was reduction in staff, because during the MacArthur, it paid for several of those individuals. And how many was that?
We had 6 additional officers that we brought on because of those MacArthur funds. We were able to save 2, and we were also able to convert our mental health professional from MacArthur grant to use that 1% mental health tax. So she's been retained as well. So, which I'll get to later. But yeah, so we were able to save 2 out of the 6.
How many people do you have right now? You said it to start with.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, the whole office has 11 and a half. We have 1 part-time. As far as pretrial service officers that are doing this work, there's 7 and a half.
And you recall, Commissioner Keeney, there was, when MacArthur did separate and pull their people out, there wasn't a good sustainability plan in place. And so that's what was lacking on all of that. Certainly be something that we'd want to look at, because it's a lot more successful than the supported release program would be, so.
And so you have 7.5 right now that are doing these services, and so you had 13 then and a half
Have to,
during the MacArthur.
that sounds correct, 12, 13.
Yeah, 13.
Madam Chair, so do we have a final report from that time period when you had those additional staff and kind of the numbers around, like people showing up for their hearings or not? And
Yeah, we have data from those years that I could use. And that would include some data from our lower courts, because we were, like I said, we were serving municipal and district as well.
Right,
So that might give you an even bigger picture. So
Our focus would go to the district court if we were to go back at this again, so.
But the point of supportive release is these are people that would probably be released on their own recognizance anyway, but Pioneer is able to help them with housing or mental health services but it's just, if they choose to take Pioneer up on that.
Yeah, and
Bond.
Yeah, I don't think you can say that they necessarily would have been OR'd because the judges said they needed this tool because they didn't want to give them bond, but they didn't
I
feel
see.
comfortable
So in
ORing
lieu
them,
of
so they
bond.
needed sort of
Okay.
a middle ground.
it's kind of.
That's how they made the pitch to us last year, at least.
And because it's voluntary, they may take that option, get out, which the majority of them have, and don't show up. And there's nothing that we can do about it because the district court has taken a position that it wouldn't be held negative against whatever they're facing. So in other words, if they show up for their court dates, there's no consequence to it. There's no carrot and no stick on it, so.
So I guess I don't understand why district court isn't wanting to go back to making it mandatory, because we've got the funding through the supportive release program to do it.
I think they told us they couldn't. I'm almost certain they told us we cannot put requirements on them like that. So
That's what I was asking.
but this seems
So I think
to say the opposite.
I think what we need to do is dive back into this, investigate it, look at the data and see what we have on the data and then maybe come back with that question.
He texted and said he has a SRTC.
I guess I'm guessing there was in the second round of the MacArthur grant, there was different things proposed.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
And so there was commitments to MacArthur to spend the money on a variety of different strategies rather than going back to a previous strategy.
I think you're correct. Yeah, I think they just tried a different approach at it. But like I said, that doesn't mean that we can't go down and talk to district court, take a look at the data and maybe come back to the board with something on that. Just that focus, that part of it.
Well, and I think show district court how it was working versus now too, just so they know. Figure out if it is really a requirement that they can't do it or if they're choosing not to.
And I don't want to speak for district court to say one way or the other, but
We'll take the dive and find out.
I think Commissioner Waldrop's right on. That previous
It was like the first round of
monitored
MacArthur.
release was a grant through MacArthur. And then this time, when the grant application was submitted multiple years ago, it was a different program, which was supported release. So at least through this, we'll get to see which ones had success and which ones didn't. But I do think it was probably a condition on, it was the grant application. It said, this is the program that you have to put in place.
But it's up to us if we would want to continue
Yes.
the pre-trial monitored release in district court. Okay.
And try to make a reduction to FTAs.
Right,
I mean, that would be a best foot forward, but again, let us go back and do our homework and then we can find out and come back.
you go to the next slide.
Did you forget where you're at?
I know, well.
Sorry, we got diverted there
I
a
did
little
a little bit, yeah. So sorry, that font's a little small there, but just speaking to the numbers that we've seen, so this data is for folks that are on our monitored release program. 97% safety rate, meaning people who are on an open monitoring file, there's 97% of them are not getting picked up on a new criminal arrest. They are not picking up new charges while they are on monitored release. Our appearance rate is 84%, which is a little bit lower, but considering the people that get put on monitored release have a history of significant fails to appear. So they're already coming in with that proclivity, and but we're able to get 84% of them to come back to court. The ones that do happen to miss a court date, that do pick up warrants, the next step we do is we do FTA follow-up. We're checking Facebook, we're checking any cell phone number we have for them, any family member. We're using all of our resources to try and track them down and get them on. Superior Court has a bench warrant recall docket that is fairly new in history, but something we didn't have years past. But they can go on a docket, get their bench warrant recall, get new court dates, and avoid the rearrest cycle. And that's a process that our office is heavily involved with. So maybe, I don't want to speculate, but one difference between perhaps our program and the supported releases, folks that aren't showing up for hearings, I don't know how much tracking down they're doing versus us. That's basically our full-time job. We're trying to get these people back to court. So that may be why we see a little bit better appearance rates than their docket, but that's just speculation, I suppose. But at the time of intake, when defendants released from jail, they come to our office to do their intake. We also do a voluntary needs assessment where we sit down with them and ask them what areas are they needing help with. And so this year alone, we've had 175 of our monitored release folks complete that intake. 53% of them requested to have follow-up by our mental health professional, our clinician. And then the numbers there break down the areas that they've been asking for help with. And it's really no surprise, housing ranks is the highest, 91 of them. Substance abuse, mental health, and employment. So those are areas we're pointing them towards resources in the community and seeing some progress there. So goes to the next slide. So I just want to talk briefly about our position, our mental health professional. Her name's Kat Armstrong. Like I said, she is funded out of that mental health tax, that 1%. She's able to provide referrals to defendants who are on monitored release and our felony diversion program, which I'll get to shortly. Those that need additional assistance, she's actually able to conduct substance abuse and mental health assessments on site in our office, which saves these folks time having to go out in the community and get that done. She does provide intensive case management for those needing additional assistance, folks with higher mental health needs or substance abuse treatment. She typically has a caseload of about 15. We're working to build that, but that's about where she's at now. And she does also follow up. She scans, there's an email that's sent to her every day of inmates who are held on $5,000 bond or less, who do have a history of mental health or substance abuse. She's working actively with the public defender and prosecutor trying to get these inmates released bed dates in the community to get the treatment that they need. I'll say she works tirelessly to do that, and it's very uphill work for her, but she does great work. She's seen some good success helping those defendants. And aside from that, it's just a blessing to have her in the office. We do have a lot of folks coming off the street with mental health issues, sometimes in progress. And it's nice to have somebody who's equipped to handle that in our office. And also go to the jail and help with interviews. So that's been a blessing for us. Yeah, the felony diversion program. This is just in Superior Court. This is a program that offers first-time nonviolent felony offenders. We divert them to community service or paying restitution, and some programs or services, sometimes we will refer them to classes such as like theft awareness classes or drug and alcohol classes. So the carrot on the stick in front of them is if they follow through with all their court-ordered requirements from the diversion program, they get their charges dismissed. It's usually about a 12-month program, so they're expected to finish their community service hours, pay their restitution within a 12-month period. The beauty of this program is that it reduces prosecutor, defense counsel, and Superior Court judges' time in traditional case processing by steering these cases off of the traditional trial track. It allows the defendant to address underlying issues and make amends with the victim and avoid that felony conviction. So there's a lot of incentive there for folks in the program. There are, at this time, no program costs to the defendant, and this actually differs from a number of programs across the state where participants do have to pay. But we do not charge the defendant to participate. We want all that money going towards restitution payments so we can make the victims whole. So, typically, they're ordered about 40 hours of community service and pay restitution. The limit's usually about 5,000. We're looking for those cases. They're fairly easy to pay off, so we're not setting people up for failure with debt they can never be whole. So, next slide. So since the program began in 2017, kind of at that same MacArthur time period, 600 cases have been sent to the diversion program, which I say helps ease the logjam. There's still a logjam, obviously, but it definitely helps keep those cases out of the main trial track. Current caseload, I wrote 103. I just checked today, we're actually up to 110, so that's good. Of the 600 cases, 411 were successfully completed. We got restitution collected and community service hours completed, and those charges were dismissed. 86 did result in termination. Those are folks who didn't comply with their conditions, didn't really do anything, and so the court revoked their diversion agreement and they were found guilty. So even though it didn't end well, it still keeps those cases out of the regular court system. Helps that logjam. 110 now are still moving through the program, so that's our active caseload right now. We've seen great progress with collecting restitution. As you can see, there are almost $400,000 we've been able to collect for victims. It's paid through the Superior Court Clerk's office, and they're the ones who send out the restitution checks to the victims. But we check in with them regularly and get reports and monitor the payments. So nothing goes through our office. There's about $33,000 on the books right now for restitution. And we've seen almost 15,000 hours of community service completed through Geiger Work Crew. We've also seen that done through Union Gospel Mission and Salvation Army and some other nonprofits, but most of that goes through the Geiger Work Crew program, and that's done about 2 days a week, Mondays and Fridays. So that's our felony diversion in a nutshell. Any questions before we move on to that? Okay. And then kind of out of the diversion topic with the Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council, our office is part of a diversion focus group, so that's pretrial services. We have representatives from the city prosecutor, county prosecutor, public defender, and the sheriff's department. And we're really looking to develop strategies to make our existing programs more visible for counsel and defendants. The sheriff's department has really taken an interest in trying to help. They've discussed maybe identifying defendants at the time of arrest when they're writing the reports. This defendant may or may not be eligible or a good candidate for some kind of diversion program. Obviously, it's not a guarantee, but they're just flagging it from the get-go, so it's a police report right away. Our office is actually involved in sending a daily list of inmates who are on the felony diversion docket of people who might be eligible for our felony diversion program. So we're getting that information out at the time of arrest and at the time of first appearance, that these are folks that we could steer from the regular trial track, get them over to diversion, get restitution paid, get some community service done, and get them off of the regular caseload. Just trying to free that up. So we're really trying to make these programs visible a lot earlier, instead of what traditionally happens is these cases kick along for a few months and then the diversion offer is made, and then maybe it happens 5 or 6 months down the road. We're trying to get that to happen as early as possible and just free up resources. So in this group, we're also exploring ideas to expand diversion programs. We talked a lot about domestic violence. Obviously, that's a huge problem in Spokane County. What can we do in that area? What kind of court, maybe a diversion program can we create to help alleviate that? So that's very much in the early stages. We're also collaborating with the Justice Management Institute. They were here last month with Mike. They toured a lot of departments and they talked with us, and we're really kind of leaning on them for their expertise. They've seen a lot of other programs around the country. They know what's going on out there, so they've been really helpful. In fact, the gal that was on site, Mary Ann Clear, she used to be the pretrial services manager in Thurston County, so she's very familiar with the work we do. She's very helpful. Maybe long-term, we'll be able to help provide data, exchange data, research what pretrial systems work best. So that's the work we're doing with them.
He's one of the 4 groups that's working on the SROJC, the focus groups. So the other ones will report out too for the board as well.
Okay. Moving right along. Public defender application, this is another big piece of work that our office does. We screen for public defender eligibility for both Superior and District Court. We do that both in custody and out of custody. In custody, we do that 7 days a week because we do have weekend staff. Out of custody, they're coming into our office, and that's 5 days a week because our office is closed on the weekends to the public. Defendants are screened and they're given the opportunity to apply while in custody. If they're found eligible, then the attorneys from the public defender's office will meet with them either prior to the first appearance or right at the time of their first appearance. And this is really crucial that they have effective counsel at their first appearance so that we don't risk filling up the jail with even more inmates than we have now. On average, we are screening 600 public defender applications per month, and that's between the two courts, Superior and District. So that's a very high caseload, or a very high workload. Basically, our office is tasked with appointing them with a public defender. They may qualify with a fee, so we may assess a fee toward the representation, or we will deny them counsel, and a judge would have to review their application if they were to appeal it. But those are basically the screening options that we have. Any questions on that?
What's your breakdown? What percentage get the PD? Which percentage get it with a fee, and which are declined?
Yeah, a large majority do qualify. A lot of them are indigent. I did actually just run this before I came over here. It's about 15 to 20% that are assessed a fee, and we send fee sheets to the courts. It is up to the courts. It's to their discretion if they want to assess those fees. We don't have any say over that, but we do send the notice to the courts that said defendant qualifies with a fee of $2,500, what have you. So we send those notices directly to the court. It's a very small fraction of people that are denied, and I think it has a lot to do with people who have assets and are working generally don't apply for a public defender because they don't think they qualify or they know they don't qualify. So a lot of them are already seeking private counsel on their own. So the denied public defender applications are fairly slim, fairly minimal.
So,
Well, is that a change from years past? Because I thought, I mean, it's been several years. It's probably been 4 or 5 years. But I thought back then it was those that received a PD with no fee, I wanted to say was above 90%.
I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. I was just running the numbers I gave you. Any month can range from about 10 to 20%. So your number may still be on point. The data I ran was from this year, but 90% still do qualify without a fee, and then that 85 to 90, and then that last chunk are assessed a fee. Very small version, or very small portion are denied public defender.
so that's the ones that are you show to assess a fee, and then you said the courts can determine to do that or not. Do we know what that, if they do or not, or what that?
Yeah, we don't.
shows?
I don't think we have any data tracking that on our end, but I would speculate that those fees are rarely imposed. Speaking back, I came from the Superior Court Clerk's office back in the day, and we would see those, and they were rarely imposed back in those days.
So back up to over 90%. Well, they get it with that.
Well, when you say it like that, yes, that is true.
Okay.
So I think we need to figure out how to track that data, to know that data.
We track
Revenue.
the amount of fees that are assessed. What we track on our end, what's actually collected or ordered. That may have to come from the Superior Court Clerk's office, but they would probably have data on that because that's done at the tail end after.
Tim would have that.
Yeah, Tim.
Can you describe how the screening works on how you determine whether someone qualifies?
Sure. Yeah. So we do have, like I said, we're kind of split between in custody and out of custody screenings. So people who are in custody obviously don't have any financial information in front of them. They didn't bring those with them to jail. So we do an in-person interview in the jail visiting booths over in the jail, and we ask them, employment information. Are they currently employed? When's the last time they were employed? We go through all of their monthly bills, if they have any. We go through all of their assets. We ask them what kind of public assistance they're getting, which we're able to verify through state databases. basis. We do have access to that. So the in custody portion is done that way. The out of custody portion is done that way as well. The only difference being if they are out of custody, we can ask them to provide financial documentation to verify what they're telling us. So basically the process is the same. It's just that with the out of custody, we can ask them for more proof, I should say.
When you say you can ask them, are they regularly asked to bring in documentation?
That's
Or
a fair
do you just
question.
take their word for it?
That's a fair question. I would say on a case-by-case basis, if it seems like the information they're giving us isn't adding up, or if they're not giving all the information to us, we do ask them to give, and we hold off on appointing them a public defender until they've provided proof. And that's typically with people who have who've reported an income, reported assets, and things like that. So, but a large portion of our folks come in and are reporting nothing. Basically food stamps, they're homeless, nothing. So to answer your question, no, we are not asking anybody for proof. All right, next slide. One of the projects we're working on right now is an online public defender application. This is something that Marysville Municipal Court has done. It's worked well for them. I think it kind of came out of the COVID era where they were trying to solve some problems. But the beauty of this, right, is that it provides non-local residents an opportunity to apply for a public defender remotely. It removes that transportation barrier. Folks from Deer Park or the Valley who can't get down here.
They still have to be within Spokane County.
They still what, right?
Have to be within Spokane County to get a public defender here.
Well, we do have people who are from out of state who are applying for a public defender. So this gives them an opportunity to apply.
So we pay for people that are outside the county. The county is paying those costs.
They're charged here in Spokane County. Yeah.
You have a charge here.
Yeah.
In Buchanan.
Yeah, these aren't let me clarify, they're not out of state charges. They are charges here in Spokane County.
But they might live in Idaho,
Yeah.
you know, or Post Falls or something like that.
Right, but then it's interesting because then our taxpayers are paying their public defense.
Yeah, that's a legal question.
I got it down.
I'm writing it down. Yeah.
So that is because we are the ones who are charging them with the crime, and so essentially it's a constitutional question that comes down to the fact that we are the ones putting their constitutional rights up into question, right? And potentially we are the ones putting them in jail. Right. And that goes back to
I'm just thinking.
yes, absolutely. But yeah, it is because the charges are being brought in this county, and so that is how the system is set up for.
I'd be curious on the data, since we're a border county, how many people that we're providing public defense for that are not Spokane County residents. Because as we are doing indigent defense argument, that would be, something that I think would be good information for us to have. I did not realize that.
Might even have that too. Dr. Collin.
I can look through it and see what we can pull.
Yeah, it'd be numbers and I don't know how to get
Numbers of
across.
out of state residents or out of county or both?
Both.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be curious on both. And then I guess it would be, number of individuals, but I don't know if there's any way to quantify what that is by hours or such.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, so the hope of this online public defender application would be remove those transportation barriers, speed up the application process. We see so many people come to court the day of, 5 minutes before their court hearing and apply for a public defender. The hope is that this would allow things to move along more quickly, be more prepared for their first court date. The other nice thing is this, what the IT department is working on, is allowing defendants to upload their financial documents for verification purposes. So now we could actually capture their financial statements, like Commissioner Kearns was alluding to. That's something we don't have in our system right now, is that ability, but through this online project, we are hoping to integrate that. And the nice thing is that it will integrate with our existing software. We're not going to have to go out and purchase new software to develop that. We can keep that in-house. We're not sure when that's going to launch. IT is working on it right now. We've tested some beta versions. It looks good so far, but we don't know exactly when that's going to roll out. So that's our biggest project forward for our office.
And how many people do you think would be using that then?
That's a good question. I honestly, I don't know right off the top of my head, but our folks from Idaho could use it potentially.
Because, the slide above, you say 600, on average, 600 applications are coming in per month. But even someone locally can use it.
Sure.
And all of that. I mean, in custody would not be able to, I wouldn't think.
Correct, yeah.
Because they don't have access or.
Yeah, in custody, we conduct those anyway.
Yeah.
We talk to them anyway. So these will be for all the out of custody folks, obviously.
Okay. So just be interesting how many could use it and start using it. I don't know in Marysville, I know the mayor talked about that program over there, Mayor Neary, but good thing.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we may not know until it actually goes online. We'll start seeing some numbers come through, so.
But I think we want to at least start to think of how many do we think that could be, so we, anticipating the benefit that it's going to be.
Okay. Okay, I think that is my last slide. Any questions, pre-trial related?
Keep looking, but nobody's there. I don't have to look that way.
Well, thank you for listening. I gave out a lot of information there, so thank you for taking the time to hear about us.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it.
You guys do a great job. You work really hard. Thank you.
We have very hardworking staff, so all credit goes to them.
No, I think as we know, this all feeds into the system and how we make it more efficient and effective moving forward, so thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next, I think, public defenders or counsel for defense will be the next one updating the board on what their performance is, so. Next, I have Don Hooper, and Haley Day. They're gonna be talking about an amendment to the DOC contract. And I'll let them provide the particulars.
I'm gonna make a note. So,
There's so many decisions.
no. So just for public perspective, yes. So just for the public that may be watching this, that we are now down to 2 commissioners. I think in the minutes, it'll be Commissioner Jordan, I believe, at 10:30, Commissioner French at 11:11, and Commissioner Waldrop is leaving at 11:35.
Place your bets, who will be the last one standing. We'll see.
So we do not have quorum any longer at this point, but we don't anticipate any decisions to be made, so we will go ahead and continue with the meeting.
Not a lot of information here, but this is just a renewal of the Department of Corrections contract for housing with detention services. It's a 2-year agreement for the rest of 23 until June, or it expires 25 or June 25. 5% escalator per year. It's a standard. I think it's defined by House bill that no more than 5%. We have specialty rates for what we call high need offenders, such as acute mental health, acute medical care, that are more appropriate given the needs for those inmates. We limit about 20 inmates at any one time, and I think this would be about 1.1 million in revenue next year. So.
And then kind of going back to, Scott, one of your questions, the state establishes their per diem rates, is that right?
They do, no more than like I said, they've told us, and it was defined by House bill, they've provided a copy, is at 5% escalator per year. The only thing we were able to work on that is about 20% of the inmates that we house for Department of Corrections are either medical care, acute medical care, mental health care, acute mental health care. We can have a much higher rate for those inmates. So rather than the $108 a day for this year and $113 a day for next year, they escalate for 182 for medical care, 160 for mental health, and then 209 for acute mental health. And about 20% of the inmates we house for DOC fall under one of those higher rates. And some of just a couple of the other changes in the contract with us, they were asking for some data sharing. That's been through with Kevin Norris from IT as well as legal. And just a few changes to the medical requirements they were asking, some of the things that we weren't able to accommodate them for, asking for permission prior to sending inmates out to the hospital, contacting the DOC nurse's desk, and we just said, we're going to house your inmates, we're not willing to do that. People who need emergent care need to go out immediately, so they worked with us on that, so.
Yeah, the original data sharing agreement that they sent to us, they're just really trying to streamline all their data sharing agreements with all their public agency contracts. And the original data sharing agreement they actually originally sent to us, we vetted through IT and we weren't going to be able to comply. So the Department of Corrections, myself, Casey Evans, who's done a lot of the data sharing agreements with in Spokane County, sat with DOC, and they were very amenable and accepted all of our changes. So we're very confident that in reality, we're sharing very minimal information with DOC. It's just that obviously, as you can see, we charge more based on medical needs. So we have to share what those medical needs are, as well as sometimes for transportation reasons, we need to give them their offenders medical information out for them. So DOC was very amenable and it's looking good.
On a kind of an average daily basis, how many DOC?
20 a day, yeah, but 19 or 20 a day.
Okay, sorry if I missed that.
And that's been pretty consistent.
Pretty consistent. Actually, we looked at it since 2020, it's 19 a day, 20, 21, back to 20 this year.
Yeah,
so
fairly consistent.
We keep them at that. We deal with their transport coordinator. We say we can't house any more than that. Seems to be a working number that local patrol can deal with as well, because they're contacting these people out in the community, and they transport out from us to keep them at 20, 5 days a week.
And when they can't come here, where do they go?
That's a very good question. We just did the same thing. I tell them if they can't come here, if we're full, they tell us they cannot book directly at Airway Heights. So a lot of them, and these are all offenders, all these offenders were out in the community the day before. So I know if we deny them based on their medical condition at book, a lot of times they'll just release them to the community and contact them at a later date. So mostly not high risk offenders. They were out the day before this. So.
And I think I know the answer to this question, but these individuals who are being brought in for DOC holds are coming from our local law enforcement?
Correct. Yep, we stopped when Director Sparver was still in detention services. We stopped probably 2 or 3 years ago, not allowing just the community corrections officers not to bring their own. They'd have to deal with other housing. We just couldn't accommodate them.
So our sheriff, our local law enforcement are the ones generally arresting these. Different from U.S. Marshals, which are coming in from U.S. Marshals, not from our local law enforcement.
But I'm even hearing from DOC individuals, probation officers, that, as we've talked about a new facility, they see the need for it. And so I'm trying to figure out are we turning people, we're turning people away because sometimes they're, re-arresting. But are they going, can they not get into Airway Heights?
What we're told is they don't have booking facilities out there. They come from another facility, but they don't have the ability to book people directly in Airway Heights.
So that's why they would come here, to rebook them and then try to get them.
And our population does ebb over 20 over the weekends, over a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It'll ebb up, in almost close to 30. And then the transport coordinator will bring us down in the teams to give them some capacity throughout the week.
DOC has a network of jails they work with, Stevens County and some of the other ones, to do those emergency, we need to get this person off the street. But if they come in with a warrant of a serious charge, the jail's taken up, so.
We're really the only ones we're denying on a regular basis are medical needs. We can't accommodate their medical needs. They bring them out to the hospital, and most of the time they contact the community corrections officer, and we just don't see them again. So.
Okay, thank you, because now they've just explained to me, I've seen a couple over the course of the last couple of months, and they're just like, oh, you guys need a new facility.
Sort of related, but not, we're not here that for today. We're also negotiating the US Marshals contract currently. We should be here again in the next few months for that, so.
And it's a per diem increase as well for that one. Okay,
Any other questions?
Donna, do you?
Thank
Don.
you.
Who's Dr. Singh on?
Oh, he's here.
And I'll let Dr. say that.
Okay, are we letting him know to come in?
Yeah, okay, I might just.
Is she here?
Oh, I thought you
Yeah, they're right here.
Oops, sorry, I'm muted. Okay. Can you hear me?
There
Yes.
we are.
There you are, Doctor.
Logistics all working. Okay, good. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. This is going to be a tag team presentation. I'm going to do a little intro and then I'm going to turn you over to the prosecutor's office to finish us off. As I'm sure you're all aware, we have a vacant deputy medical examiner position. It's now been vacant for just over a year. We posted it last August. As I probably also mentioned before, there's a severe and worsening forensic pathologist shortage, and there are a lot of jobs open in Washington, across Washington and across the country. So the competition is really fierce for a very limited pool of candidates. All of the studies on physician recruitment tell us that salary and location are the most important factors that candidates look at when they're evaluating a potential job. In the realm of forensic pathology, our salaries here in Spokane County are on the lower end of the range that's being offered. Our benefits are moderate to low end, so that's not really distinguishing us from the rest of the offices. And then as far as location, we know that Spokane is a nice place to live, but if somebody's not from the area and they're in the Midwest or the Southeast and they're thinking, they want to live in the Northwest, mostly they're thinking Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, Vancouver, maybe Boise, the bigger places that have that name recognition. So Spokane, just the name by itself doesn't have that name recognition. So competing on these kind of traditional parameters has had us coming up short for more than a year now. So at this point, we need to be more creative in how we're setting ourselves apart from our competition, basically. So that brings us to what I'm doing here today. There is a way that we can distinguish ourselves from all of the other medical examiner offices and also increase our candidate pool. And that's by setting ourselves up to accept applications from international medical graduates. Looking at the data from the last several years, about 30% of forensic pathology fellows, so those people who are in the last year of their forensic pathology training who are actively looking for jobs, roughly 30% of those trainees are people who completed medical school in another country and then came to the US for their graduate medical training. So in order to pursue graduate medical training here, they have to first, even before they come, be certified by a National Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. That's a US institution. And then they have to apply for and be accepted to residency and fellowship programs, just as any US medical graduate would have to. And then once they complete their residency and fellowship, they're eligible to be board certified and to obtain medical licenses wherever they end up working, just as any US medical graduate is. Most of these doctors come here on what is called a J-1 visa, and because of the conditions of that visa, they are either required to return to their home country after they complete their training, or they can apply for a waiver of that requirement, and that means that they agree to work for an employer in an underserved region for at least 3 years. Hospitals use this waiver program commonly to fill their physician vacancies, but medical examiner offices have actually been really slow to recognize this as a pathway for addressing the forensic pathologist shortage. Because relatively few offices engage in this program, if we position ourselves to sponsor a waiver for a J1 candidate, that will give us an advantage and also allow us this broader applicant pool, broaden our pool by 30%. We actually have some real world data that this would give us a better chance of filling our position, because over the last year, we've had only 4 applicants for our position. 3 of those have been from international medical graduates. And so in the past year, those have been automatically disqualified. But if we were able to accept those applications going forward, that would again give us more opportunity for filling this position. So that's my brief intro. I'm going to turn this over to the attorney's office, and they have a PowerPoint to talk about the logistics of this program.
And board members, I'd like to introduce you to Kevin Logue. He is our Gonzaga intern. He's been with us since the beginning of this summer. And Kevin, conveniently enough for this particular issue, it does have some previous experience working with a immigration law firm and working in immigration areas. So he brought to us some familiarity with visa programs and doing all the paperwork to make those happen. So he and Chris Davis kind of took lead on putting this together. So I will turn it over to him.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Davis, for allowing me to do this. Members of the board, I know time is limited, so I'll just get right to it. So thank you, Dr. Singh, for that really informative introduction. So we're talking about the J1 visa waiver program, and specifically the forensic pathologist exception. Next slide, please. So what is it? I think Dr. Singh touched on this a little bit, but it's basically a program that was created by the Department of Health of Washington for the purpose of increasing the number of doctors that provide care to patients in areas where there are shortages of health professionals, such as Spokane County. Next slide, please. So I think also Dr. Singh touched on this a little bit, but the program can be used by foreign doctors, physicians that who commit to serve for 3 years in an underserved area of Washington. So as she mentioned, they're typically in J1 visas, but they have to leave the country. So basically what happens is if they commit to serving a population that's underserved, medically speaking, they can waive that and they can work in the States. So they're allowed to stay here. And regarding a specific need for forensic pathologists, the Washington Association of Coroners and Medical Examiners approached the Department of Health because it was a big issue, and it was decided that of the waivers that are available each year, 1 specifically would be for a forensic pathologist position. Next slide.
Is that across the state or at each?
That is across the state. There's 30 waivers per year, and one of those is specifically for the forensic pathologist position because it's so difficult to get that particular position filled. And that is the perfect segue to why does Spokane County need it? Well, as Dr. Singh mentioned, they've had trouble in the past to find candidates to fill the vacant forensic pathologist position. The requirement for the waiver to apply is 6 months, and actually we're over 12 months now, trying to find a suitable candidate. During that time, they had 4 potential candidates ask about opportunities, but 3 of those were international medical graduates, so they would not be able to apply under the current conditions. The J1B visa waiver program, however, would allow them to consider, would allow the medical examiner's office to consider foreign national candidates and thus have better chances of filling that critical vacancy. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons that it is really important to fill this vacancy is the medical examiner's office caseload. They currently only have 3 pathologists, and they are handling what is an ever-increasing caseload. So over the long term, that is just not sustainable, and there's several repercussions, consequences that can come from that. Number 1 is that their accreditation and name, that is the National Association of Medical Examiners, is in jeopardy because of this. And not only that, but the forensic pathologists that are currently working in the medical examiner's office have limited availability for the rest of the duties that they would typically do, like participate in court proceedings, just to name one of the main ones that main duties that they perform. Next slide, please. So I think Dr. Stingel should talk about this a little bit, but basically the medical examiner's office would screen any waiver program applicant just as they would any other candidate. There's nothing here that implies that these are candidates of lesser quality. It's just the exact same process. It's just an immigration alternative. Any forensic pathologist that is applying under the waiver must have completed the residency and fellowship in the United States and would be eligible for a license to practice in any other state. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the legal implications, the requirements that are in the Washington Code, and that is in chapter 246, 562. Next slide, please. So the first issue, the first hurdle, if you will, that we found here is that this particular statute here, 254-562-060, section 3A states that the applicant organization, in this case, that would be the medical examiner's office, they must currently serve, number 1, Medicare clients, number 2, Medicaid clients, 3, low-income clients, 4, uninsured clients, and 4, a population of the federal HBSA designation. That, I can go more into detail of what that entails, but that is basically, it's connected to a shortage of medical services. And Spokane County is actually classified as that.
Right, but since the person is deceased, they don't meet these
So
qualifications.
that's the next slide.
Precisely.
Okay.
I bet you Dr. Singh has worked on somebody that meets all of these. Somebody who
Every day.
was on Medicare, was on Medicaid, was low income, was uninsured.
When they were alive, maybe this would apply. Sadly. But I mean, there is an answer here, is that we emailed the manager of the waiver program just asking, so we know there is an exception here, but how specifically would it apply if the requirements wouldn't be met? And she said that specifically because of how difficult it has been to find a forensic pathologist, they do not have to comply with that requirement of the populations served. We got that directly from the program manager. Next slide, please. This takes us to the second issue that we found, and is that section 246, statute 246-562-080, section 4 states that the physician, applicant, the doctor must provide direct patient care. Now, the issue with this is that the duties of the forensic pathologist do not involve providing direct care, again, for the reason that the obvious, they're dead. So basically, those are the duties that they would perform. It's conducting death investigations, performing post-mortem examinations, supervising support staff, providing expert testimony, assisting with office admin, serving as acting department head if needed. And like I previously mentioned, this does not include providing direct patient care. Next slide, please. However, again, the program manager explained that because of the growing need for forensic pathologists and the conversations between the Association of Coroners and Medical Examiners of Washington and the Department of Health, they decided that this one specific exception for forensic pathologists, that applicant would not have to comply with the previous section or this section, those two statutes. Next slide, please. Now, here, these two statutes in these particular sections here, 242-562-010, sections 4 and 5, and 246-562-060, sections 4, 5, and 6, state that the doctor, the applicant, must have a 3-year employment contract with the county. Further, that the contract obviously has to be a legally binding agreement and must contain terms of conditions of employment, such as length of employment, 3 years salary, benefits, etc. Now, the issue that this presents for the county is that typically providing this kind of contract would create general expectations of continued employment for that particular applicant. And typically those go above and beyond what the county offers to forensic pathologists. What that means is that likely termination of such an individual, an applicant that utilizes the exception to the waiver program would involve some additional process, similar to what an employee, similar to when an employee that is under some sort of bargaining agreement would entail, it would be a similar process because of this employment contract requirement. Next slide, please. So what has the program manager said about this specific, those two statutes? Well, basically, she said that, yeah, they do have to comply, the applicants, with the two statutes. Actually, in the application package, one of the items that has to be included is the employment contract, the one that is sent to the Department of Health. It has to include the employment contract. However, it is important to note that nothing in the statute prevents the county from offering an at-will contract to the applicant physician. And as part of the application process, the contract will be reviewed, obviously, and approved by the Department of Health. And after approval from the Department of Health from Washington State, basically, it goes to the Department of State. So the federal government, basically. Next slide, please. So I know we've been talking about what the program manager has said via email regarding the specific statutes requirements that would not apply. And why that is important is because the Department of Health specifically is the agency that wrote the code that we're talking about, the one that is pertinent to the visa waiver program. So what that means is that they manage the program and they have the legal authority of interpreting the statute itself and whatever else is related to the programs. So by utilizing the exception, the county, Spokane County, would not accrue any legal liability because this is something that they are allowed to do. And this is coming directly from the program manager in the Department of Health. Next slide, please. So where does that leave us, basically? What are we requesting for the Board of Commissioners? Next slide, please. So basically, we're asking for the Board of Commissioners to authorize an employment contract like the one I described that would allow a forensic pathologist position to be available to J1 visa waiver applicants via this particular forensic pathologist exception. Next slide, please. Does it?
So is it something that would go on our consent agenda? We don't have three head nods, so we'd have to.
No. Obviously, the board cannot take action today because we do not have a quorum. So no action for this morning. It could go on a consent agenda. I think the issue, obviously, this would need to be would need to put some stuff together before it could be moved through. But I think the reason, and Dr. Singh can jump in, but the reason for getting kind of pre-approval on this is because in the event there is an applicant who's a good candidate, who qualifies, is that, the paperwork needs to kind of get moving. There is, I think, as I recall from the Department of Health, the J1 visa application process opens in October. And so I believe it just opened, and obviously if you get a candidate, you want to be able to kind of get that process going. But it's one of those things where we can kind of tailor it to what, obviously within the legal bounds of the program, but with what will work for Spokane County, and then put that application forward to Department of Health. And so really there are no legal liability issues because Department of Health and the U.S. State Department are going to be signing off on the application on the front end of this. So this is not the county kind of unilaterally making a decision as far as vetting a candidate and saying, oh yeah, we think everything's here and it works, and then later finding out it doesn't. It's we're getting approval on the front end from both the state and the feds. And so if they approve it, any risk as far as participating in the J1 visa program is really borne by the applicant, and the ramifications would be to the individual's visa.
So does it really, it's nice to have it come before us, but I don't think we normally don't have to take any action on employment contracts. That's union contracts. But I think this would be within the purview of, you've kind of informed us, but it's not a requirement for us to even give you head nods to move forward. Just because the need's there, we know it, and we're not authorizing employment contracts that meet the RCWs, which you've already explained how it does meet the RCWs, so.
Right.
I'm kind of thinking we don't,
And that's,
that we needed to really do anything other than just be like, hopefully you can find someone that, you know, will fit this criteria.
I'll certainly let Dr. Singh speak to whether I know there was one applicant at one point who could have potentially filled this, though I don't know if we had the application open for long enough, though at this point, the position has certainly been open long enough to qualify. So any future applicants or current applicants that may meet these qualifications could potentially be run through this.
Right, yeah, I mean, if it's okay with the county to accept those, then that would be great. Right now is when the people in training are starting to look for and apply for jobs. There's a big forensic meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. I'd like to send some of our flyers with a colleague to that meeting to hand out and kind of beat the bushes for people. So this would be something, no other medical examiner offices in Washington State currently are set up or are willing to take this on. So it would give us a competitive advantage in Washington, at least. We, as Mr. Anderson mentioned, we did have an applicant that applied about a year ago, and he's taken a position in Florida. That office was able to sponsor his waiver. And then since that time, we've had a couple of other ones, but they don't quite suit our needs. So again, because we're screening them as we would any other applicant, we'll keep looking and keep hoping that we get somebody in this next round. So yeah, if I have everyone's agreement that we can go forward with that, I'll put a little blurb on our flyer and invite applicants from this pool.
Ashley?
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear the shift from last year's opinion to this year's. So this is awesome. Like, I'm so excited about this because we did look at this last August and it just wasn't viable at that time. But like, your work is amazing, so thank you for doing that.
This is, and I will give all the credit to Kevin. Kevin reached out to the Department of Health, did all this legwork because on its face, we categorically did not qualify, and those were precisely the issues we ran into. And Kevin putting the extra time in to reach out directly to Department of Health and kind of get the real details. And I think one of the reasons that it's not really kind of more well known, like Dr. Singh referenced, no other counties in Washington have been able to take advantage of this. There are other places in the country that have. Department of Health kind of told us about a couple of them, and so we certainly would be blazing a trail as far as Washington goes for utilizing this.
Well, and if there's only going to be one slot within the state, I'd love to be able to be the ones getting that slot.
Yeah.
So and I think thank you, Kevin, for doing all the legwork, because I think it does show, it shows me that we meet the state law and requirements, with them, with the back and forth that, through there. So again, as long as we're meeting the state law, there's not anything I think the commissioners are really party to.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I would say, at least my recommendation, so this is employment related, so I would hope that this continues to go through our normal applicant process review. The offer letter will need to look different, and I would say that's where the HR office will be needing to reach out to the prosecutor's office. So Vina, I know you've been, last week you emailed Heather about this, and so if we could make sure that we're just keeping Heather plugged in on this, and so when we get to offer letter, and if we get to offer letter, we find a good candidate, we're drafting that contract, so to speak, in a way that we are not locking ourselves into continued employment, so that we are referencing whether it's a policy manual or something, we'll need to figure out that, but how that looks so that we do still have some sort of at-will embedded in. I think it's important to note at the county, we've never just termed someone for no reason, right? Whether you're bargaining or non-bargaining. So I have no concern in managing in that, but I just want to make sure that the HR department is in lockstep with Vina, with Dr. Singh, and with prosecutors, and that we're working together as a team so that we don't end up in silos in a place we don't mean to.
And I would assume you'd still go through the probationary period and all of that, just like any other.
It probably might tweak a little bit. So the probationary period is where it might get a little bit weird, but even in probationary, there is
we all know what employment law looks like, right? You have to be very thoughtful on why you're terming someone, and it's not just because I don't like you anymore, right? There's a lot that comes with it. So we would follow similar suit of what was the violation, what was the policy, right? But it would look a little different probably than our current policy practices.
Legally speaking, there may not be a strict procedure or policy to follow in this scenario, but I think it would likely follow something similar to a bargaining contract where you would go through some sort of, I guess, Loudermill-esque hearing or process prior to discipline or termination, just because there is I guess, slightly additional expectation that there's a term of employment as opposed to just open-ended as kind of we normally do it, but it does not appear to be anything that really, permanently locks the county in or anything to that. It's really kind of, from what we've seen, just this expectation that, the county intends to have this person, at least at the outset, be an employee for 3 years so that the State Department isn't issuing visas for, that are really only gonna last for 6 months. They want some, at least, intention that the county is committed to this visa, to the program for the 3-year term. Seems to be the real intent behind that 3-year contract.
And in positions like these, I often don't have heartburn around a lot. I mean, there's a lot of vetting that comes into it, so I think this is an amazing opportunity, and if we can jump on it, I would highly recommend that we do that.
Awesome.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much. Keep your fingers crossed for us.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
One more.
Okay, so then discussion on, I thought we talked about if people were gonna be gone, they needed to let us know. So we'll have the discussion this afternoon.
Just Mondays or Tuesdays is all we gotta commit to, like in this room. It's like,
No,
wow,
it's like it's more than just,
everything else gets pushed to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
yeah. Or we can adjust, but we can only adjust when we know. So it's the chair and the vice chair, it's who wants to. Hello, good morning. Still morning? No, it's afternoon now.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. It is afternoon. Good afternoon, yes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so I'll let you go since we're already running behind.
You want to start?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Commissioners. Arian Schmidt, Executive Director of Broadlink. Want to thank both your time and Shrek. This is in response to the Spokane South County pilot that we are working on. We are queuing up the 8 locations to bring high-capacity internet using that semi-fixed technology to West Spokane County. One of those locations involved the Tower, operated by Shrek, owned by Spokane County. And the firm that we've been working with, NewJ, has been working with Dusty's team in making sure that there were no conflicts with the core operations that Shrek provides. That has gone through Shrek, so I'll kind of hand it off here to them as far as then the final consideration for approval of use by Broadlink for a device on that tower as part of the network of connectivity.
So what we asked NewJ to do is to fund a study with us on what the tower load would be. So they went through the process of doing that. We got that information back, and Dusty and his team have reviewed that information at the radio shop to just see if there's any large impacts that would impact our public safety partners. We don't want to see that happen. That's always our concern. Additionally, if that load would be excessive to the point that we would have to look at serious charges, things like that, to be able to maintain that. So I'll let Dusty kind of go over what they found in that and what the board ultimately decided on. So.
Yeah, 2 studies were performed. One, structural load. Could the tower itself have the capacity to hold 7 pieces of equipment? And that was deemed sound, no issues. We're going to reach probably 35% of the weight capacity with the additions, the proposed additions. So no concerns there. A frequency interference study was also done to see if the frequency frequencies used by Broadlink would interfere with the public safety microwave frequencies there. No predicted interference was found for that as well.
We brought that before our board this last month in September, let them know what the impact of that would be, and we have support from the board to allow for NewJay to put some equipment on there. So it was a agreed to vote by everybody. So that's the recommendation to you from us, is that if this is something that you guys would like to see happen, we support doing that. That we'll work ourselves on a lease with NewJay on, if for some reason once that equipment is up there, not a lease, I'm sorry, a contract. If for some reason when that equipment is up there, if it has any interference, if it causes any damage, we have the right and the ability to take that equipment off as soon as possible for the sake of public safety. We're working on that with our attorney right now, but that'll just be a contract and agreement between the two agencies that says, hey, if there's any problem with that, we have the right to take that off as soon as possible, and we'll work out a different option. So.
And the contract's actually with Broadlink and Shrek, so it's public entity to public entity. NewJay is a subcontracted operator of Broadlink, and so this contract would allow Broadlink to be on there beyond the life of the pilot as we go looking at long-term sustainability and things like that. So that at this point, it's public entity to public entity that the contract would be with.
So these are assets, towers owned by the county. We've had worked some years ago with Shrek under our ILA, where Shrek does all of the operations, maintenance, provisioning of the equipment on these things. Principal purpose is for emergency communications, our public safety, but we want to be mindful of if there are other opportunities to place equipment on there that we have Shrek have the applicant do the loading and the frequency interference, just to make sure that there won't, because again, principally public safety, emergency communications is the use of them. So that's something that the Shrek team had worked up. Once they've done that and it all passes, then the board does a recommendation. It's like, hey, the Shrek board recommends, based on the evaluation, that the county allow for this to go on there. So our next steps would be to work on some sort of lease agreement. I'm not sure yet, and our attorneys are aware of this as well. I don't know how that'll look, whether it would be a direct lease agreement between the county and Broadlink, whether it'll be county Shrek Broadlink, or whether there'll be two different ones. So that still has to be worked out. But anyhow, the work's been done to evaluate, and I think the recommendation makes sense. They'll support it.
And last I heard on the contract, I've been in touch with Brian Wurst on this, and it sounds like he's taken lead on preparing those documents, and it sounds like he would get back to us as soon as those are ready.
So just to make sure, because it's between Broadlink and Shrek.
I'm not sure that it will be.
In Spokane County.
Okay.
So Spokane County is still the underlying property owner.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll have to figure out which parties are part of it.
Yeah.
So the legal relationships is kind of what need to be sorted out in the contracts, and so.
All three lawyers have been involved, so Todd on behalf of Broadlink, Brian on behalf of Shrek, and then Chris on behalf of the county.
Okay. Yeah. Very good, just making sure all three are talking. So, yes. And then it would just show up on the consent agenda?
Yep, once the contracts are ready, then, it'll be brought forward.
That was our main reason, is just to bring you awareness, and if you're comfortable when legal signs off on it, just to put as usual on the consent agenda.
We don't have a quorum, but at this point, due to that, I'm happy to, if it shows up on a consent agenda, if other commissioners have questions, they can ask questions.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Sounds great to us. That's all you got is us.
That's good enough. That's good enough for us.
I'll take it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Was that your shortest one today? Did we do okay?
Yeah, you guys did. Okay, so next we have miscellaneous. Any other miscellaneous items?
One single one, I believe. And quick at that.
We're gonna try and drag it out as long as we possibly.
Thanks, George.
What we have is just the contract with Volunteers of America to construct the Crosswalk 2.0 facility. So that's kind of the multi-use facility that they've got proposed for development over by the community college. We wanted to bring before you the contract, so attached in the agenda packet was this contract with Volunteers of America that's been signed. After talking with legal and grants, we've decided that we probably need to take a second look at that and make sure that we've got a few additional elements in that contract. So briefing you, letting you know that we're still working on that contract before it's ready for final signature. So once we do have that trued up, then we'll be looking to go to consent to sign that contract.
Okay, and this is the 2 million of ARP home dollars
Yes.
that is happening, okay. And so then does it need to go to consent, or because the ARP contracts I was able to sign as the chair?
So only the application for, to HUD to allow the crosswalk project or a project like that to be funded had been approved by the commissioners prior to that. So the contract, this is through ARP Home, not our ARP traditional sources. So this would then come back on the consent. Yep.
Okay.
Well, then
So it's
we
on
have-
today.
Yeah.
And we'll have to
5C.
remove it. We'll have to remove it because it needs a little bit more evaluation. So 5C needs to come off for this afternoon.
Okay.
But the commissioners had been aware of this before the application was going out, but just wanted to give another quick touch to let you know, hey, we've now got the contract that's working forward and we'll be on a consent agenda coming up. Wasn't this afternoon, it'll be off now.
Okay, so we're striking 5C.
Yep.
From today's agenda then.
Soon to show up again. Yeah.
Very good.
All right. Did we just beat Ariane?
You did.
Yes. Take that, Ariane.
I think so. Thank you.
But they were both after 12 o'clock, so it doesn't count. Either
right.
you're late.
You're already late.
Yeah, they're already late.
So I have, on today's agenda, the continuation 6A.
And so I have been in touch with Matt Koza on that issue. He received the same letter that you forwarded to me, and it sounds like he has been in touch or will be in touch shortly with the attorneys who are involved in that. He's requested a 2-week continuance of that matter in order to kind of sort out the issue that was raised yesterday afternoon.
And for today.
Exactly. And so if we could, I know that that is on for both a continuation of the public hearing and then a decision.
So should we let the person know, I mean, so do I still want to, in case other people come?
Yeah, that would be my.
I guess that's what I need
I
to
mean,
know
that
before 2
that would
o'clock.
kind of be my my suggestion is to let's finish up the public hearing portion of this and let anybody who shows and wants to discuss the matter or put something on the record speak, close the public hearing and continue the decision on the road vacation for 2 weeks in order to kind of address this issue.
Would we not want to continue the public testimony because it could change people, I mean, depending on what legal comes back with, it could change public testimony.
And that's at the board's option.
I'll probably, I will most likely move to continue both the public hearing and final decision to what date? What are you thinking?
So I was 2 weeks, so that would put it on the 17th.
17th.
Yeah.
Okay, and then 6B, there was discussion on
Correct. And so
continuing that. We have lots of work to
this,
do.
yes, we do. I apologize. It got a little convoluted. And also in relation, somewhat related to 6B is 5B. And so what we're asking for on both for 6B, we can move forward with the public hearing as scheduled and close that public hearing, and then continue that decision. And the reason for that is we are simply waiting on some follow-up with the Department of Revenue to do some kind of calculations on that, and then that can then move forward to decision next week. That will not really impact the public testimony portion of it.
Next week being,
That would be the
10th.
10th. Yeah, correct. And then also similarly, there is myself and Jim Amacio would like to brief the board in executive session before the board takes action on 5B. And obviously, since we don't have the rest of the board here today,
Can we strike it?
we could strike and reset it as well.
That might be the best thing.
Fine with me?
Yeah, either procedure
Well,
works
then
fine. We anticipate.
is that Bob then taking public hearing on 6B if 5B wasn't adopted? Do those have to be in conjunction with each other?
They are certainly related. I don't believe they need to be done simultaneously, but the intent, I will say the intent on 5B is to put it back on the agenda for next week. We would just like to have that opportunity to brief the full board in executive session prior to the board taking that action. So I do imagine they will both be on the board's agenda, on the same agenda.
Okay, and do we think 5C is gonna come back in a week, or is that longer? Just
Hopefully, I think.
I think that's what they'd be
Well,
targeting
we'll
next
just leave
week.
it stricken, but since 5B and 6B relate to each other, I just wanna make sure that people know that the B come back at the same time.
Yes, yeah.
So with that, would it be better just to continue with the discussion as well? I don't see any
We
reason why we
certainly,
couldn't.
we can,
Just to be as transparent as possible.
and that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so we'll continue the public hearing and discussion for both items.
And as a quick reminder, as Gina just gave me a heads up to, we do have the by leave item for the notice to set the hearing for the 10th, for the board to consider and take action to oppose or support measure 1.
Okay, and then on 6B, I think we all received the letter. In opposition. Have you
Yeah.
received?
I have not received any.
Okay, would you forward that?
On the 27th?
Yeah, would you forward that to Gina?
I would.
So I don't know, on a public hearing, then a letter that we received in opposition of it.
Yeah, that should probably go, that letter should probably be put into the record as a comment on that. I don't know that we need to necessarily read that into the record, but but certainly we should include that as part of the board's.
I have that one, yes, I apologize. I'm putting together a list of comments for the TPA and the other one I have so far.
Okay. I'm just, since there seems to be a lot happening with these.
Yes,
more than
there
normal.
is, it all kind of came up at once.
And then 2, the proclamation for the domestic violence didn't get on today's agenda for some reason, so it will be.
What was that?
The proclamation for the domestic violence month.
Oh.
Which is October, which we agreed to a while back. We will need to make sure it's on. And I don't know if you have Pat update it.
I gave him a copy of the old one and we'll work on drafting.
Okay, because Pat, you had gotten that, right?
Yes, I have we were talking about the domestic violence proclamation.
Yes.
Yes, I was just waiting back to hear back on some data to see if the data was still current. I haven't heard, so we could just run it with the citations in there. They're from the previous time we passed it.
Okay, well, hopefully, if you could talk to Lyndon, you know, since it's now delayed till next week, that we could get it updated and corrected.
Yep, I'll follow up with them again.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, is there anything else for today, since it was such a short agenda that now it's turning into a crazy agenda? Hopefully between Josh and I will get it all figured out.
We'll do it.
I got it. So.
Hopefully there'll be a quorum.
Last two standing. We'll get it done.
Might be no actions.
Okay, well, with that, we will adjourn the meeting today, this morning. It is 12:26 and we'll see everybody back at 2 o'clock.